Hello everyone, and welcome back to our little community of dreamers and curious minds. Tonight, we're descending into a realm that exists beyond the reach of sunlight, beyond the familiar patterns of day and night, into a world where pressure could crush steel and yet life not only survives but flourishes in the most extraordinary ways. We're journeying to the deep sea, that vast, mysterious frontier that covers more of our planet than all the land combined. And we're going to meet the remarkable creatures that call this eternal twilight home. Let me share something absolutely remarkable with you. In the deepest trenches of the ocean, nearly 7 miles below the surface where the pressure is over 1,000 times greater than at sea level, there are fish with bodies so delicate they would collapse into gel if brought to the surface. Yet down in their realm they glide gracefully through the darkness. These creatures, called snailfish, have evolved bodies without air-filled spaces that would be crushed by the immense pressure. Instead, their flesh is soft and gelatinous, their bones flexible, and they move through the abyss like liquid shadows, completely adapted to conditions that would seem impossible for complex life. They remind us that life finds a way not just to survive, but to thrive in places we once thought utterly barren. If you enjoy these types of videos where we drift through the mysteries of the deep ocean, uncovering secrets that will fill you with wonder as you relax, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe. It truly helps our community grow, allowing more people to find this peaceful corner where curiosity and calm meet. Now let your mind settle in, breathe slowly, and imagine you're descending gently through layers of blue that darken with each passing moment. Join me on this tranquil journey through the deep sea, where every fact is a small lantern illuminating the darkness, and every creature we encounter is a testament to the beautiful strangeness of life on Earth. Deep in the ocean drifts a creature that has solved one of life's greatest mysteries, the problem of death itself. The Turritopsis dohrnii, often called the immortal jellyfish, possesses an ability that sounds like science fiction but is quietly, beautifully real. When this tiny jellyfish faces stress, injury, or simply the passage of time beginning to wear on its body, it can reverse its aging process entirely. Its cells transform back to an earlier developmental stage, essentially returning the jellyfish to youth. Imagine if you could, when feeling the weight of years, simply restart your life cycle and grow up again, carrying forward into a new beginning. This jellyfish can repeat this process indefinitely, making it theoretically immortal unless consumed by a predator or struck by disease. It drifts through the ocean currents, a tiny bell of translucent tissue no larger than a pinky nail, holding within itself the secret to eternal renewal. Scientists study these delicate beings, hoping to understand the mechanisms of cellular transformation they employ so effortlessly, wondering what lessons about aging, healing, and the nature of life itself might be hidden in their transparent bodies. Picture this: you're floating in complete darkness, miles below the ocean's surface, in a region so deep it's named after Hades, the ancient Greek underworld. This is the Hadal Zone, the deepest realm of the ocean, and even here, there is sound. Not the silence you might expect, but a quiet symphony. Scientists have lowered sensitive microphones into these trenches and discovered that the deep sea sings. There are rumbles from distant earthquakes traveling through the water, the creaking groans of shifting tectonic plates, and perhaps most hauntingly, the calls of creatures we've never seen. Some recordings capture strange clicking sounds, mysterious hums, and patterns of noise that suggest communication between animals adapted to eternal night. These sounds travel vast distances through the water, moving through the darkness like invisible threads connecting life in the abyss. When you listen to recordings of the Hadal Zone, processed to be audible to human ears, they sound otherworldly yet strangely peaceful, a deep ocean lullaby that has played since long before humans walked the earth. In the deep sea, where food is scarce and arrives in unpredictable intervals, patience becomes a survival skill elevated to an art form. The giant isopod, a creature that looks like an enormous pill bug the size of a football, has mastered this art. These armored scavengers crawl slowly across the ocean floor on 14 legs, searching for meals in the darkness. When food does arrive, perhaps the body of a dead whale drifting down from above, the isopod feasts, gorging itself with methodical thoroughness. But here's what makes these creatures truly remarkable. Giant isopods have been observed surviving for over 5 years without eating a single meal. 5 years. They enter a state of extremely low metabolic activity, their bodies barely ticking over, patiently waiting in the dark until the next meal descends from the distant surface. Imagine possessing such patience, such calm acceptance of scarcity, such trust that eventually, sustenance will come. They sit motionless in the eternal night, their pale segmented bodies resting on the sediment, conserving every ounce of energy, existing in a state between life and hibernation, reminding us that sometimes survival means simply enduring, quietly, until conditions improve. Let your mind drift now to something that seems impossible, underwater clouds that glow with living light. Certain species of deep-sea jellies and colonial organisms called siphonophores can create bioluminescent displays so vast they resemble glowing clouds drifting through the darkness. When disturbed or hunting, these creatures light up in cascading waves of blue-green luminescence, creating spheres of light that can be dozens of feet across. Imagine swimming through the deep ocean and suddenly encountering one of these ethereal displays, a glowing nebula of living light pulsing gently in the current. These bioluminescent clouds serve multiple purposes. They can startle predators with sudden brightness, create confusion to aid escape, or attract smaller creatures that then become prey. But beyond their practical purposes, they represent something profoundly beautiful, life creating light in the deepest darkness, transforming the abyss into a cathedral of gentle, ghostly illumination. Some deep-sea explorers describe encountering these glowing clouds as one of the most magical experiences of their lives, a reminder that even in Earth's most alien environments, beauty flourishes in forms we never imagined. Now, breathe slowly and picture one of the strangest and most wonderful adaptations in all the ocean. Swimming in the twilight zone, that dim region where the last photons of sunlight fade into blackness, lives a fish with a completely transparent head. The barrel-eye fish, or Macropina microstoma, has a soft, see-through dome covering its skull, and through this transparent shield, you can see its tubular eyes inside its own head, pointing upward like twin telescopes aimed at the faint light above. For decades, scientists only saw dead specimens where this transparent dome had been damaged, and they couldn't understand the fish's anatomy. It wasn't until submersibles observed barrel eyes in their natural habitat that the mystery was solved. These fish hang motionless in the water, their upward-pointing eyes scanning the dim light above for the silhouettes of prey. The transparent dome protects their sensitive eyes from the stinging cells of jellyfish, which the barrel eye sometimes steals food from. Even stranger, those tubular eyes can rotate forward when the fish wants to see where it's going or examine what it's about to eat. Imagine having eyes that could swivel inside your transparent skull, allowing you to look up through the top of your head, and then rotate them forward when needed. The barrel eye drifts through the perpetual twilight, a living testament to evolution's creativity. Despite having perhaps the most frightening name in the entire ocean, the vampire squid is actually one of the gentlest creatures you could meet in the deep sea. Vampirotuthis infernalis. Vampire squid from hell earned its dramatic name from its dark red or black coloration, the webbing between its arms that resembles a vampire's cape, and its large blue eyes. But this small, delicate creature, about the size of a football, is completely harmless. Unlike most squid and octopuses that are active predators, the vampire squid drifts through the darkness eating marine snow, those gentle drifts of organic particles falling from the upper ocean. It uses two thin filaments to collect these particles, then draws the filaments through its arms to extract the food. When threatened, instead of attacking, it performs what scientists call a pineapple posture, turning its cape-like webbing inside out over its body, exposing harmless-looking fleshy spines that make it appear larger and less appetizing. The vampire squid also has organs that can produce bioluminescent clouds of glowing mucus, which it releases as a decoy before swimming away. So this creature with the most terrifying name is actually a shy, peaceful drifter, eating falling debris and running away from danger, reminding us that names can be deeply misleading and that even in the deep sea, not everything that looks fearsome is dangerous. Here's a story from the deep sea that is simultaneously beautiful, strange, and somewhat sad. In the darkest depths where finding a mate would seem nearly impossible, anglerfish have evolved one of nature's most extreme solutions to reproduction. In many anglerfish species, the males are tiny, sometimes 100 times smaller than the females, and their entire existence revolves around finding a female in the vast darkness. When a male does find a female, he doesn't just mate with her, he permanently fuses to her body, biting into her skin and releasing an enzyme that digests his mouth and her flesh, joining them together. Over time, the male loses most of his organs, becoming little more than a parasitic appendage that provides sperm whenever the female needs it. His circulatory system connects to hers, and she provides him with nutrients while he provides reproductive services. Some females have been found with multiple males attached, creating a bizarre colony. It's a strategy born of desperate necessity, life finding a way to reproduce in conditions so extreme that conventional courtship is impossible. The female anglerfish drifts through the abyss, her bioluminescent lure glowing to attract prey, carrying with her the absorbed remnants of males who gave up their independence for the chance to reproduce, a strange and permanent devotion written in flesh. Let your breathing slow as I share with you one of the most beautiful and important phenomena in the deep ocean. When a whale dies and its enormous body sinks to the seafloor, it creates what scientists call a whale fall, and it becomes an oasis of life in the desert-like abyss. A single whale carcass can sustain unique communities of creatures for decades. First come the mobile scavengers, giant isopods, sleeper sharks, and hagfish that tear away flesh in a feeding frenzy that can last months. Then arrive specialized worms and crustaceans that burrow into the bones, eating the lipid-rich marrow. Finally, bacteria colonize the skeleton, breaking down the last nutrients, and these bacteria support an entirely unique ecosystem of worms and clams that live nowhere else on Earth. Some whale falls support life for 50 years or more, creating isolated islands of abundance in the otherwise sparse deep sea. These sites are so important that unique species have evolved to live specifically on whale bones, traveling somehow across vast distances to find new falls, though we're still not entirely sure how they locate them. The skeleton of a whale, lying peacefully on the ocean floor, becomes a long, slow gift to the deep, nourishing generations of creatures in the darkness, a final act of generosity from a creature that spent its life swimming through sunlight. In the deepest parts of the ocean, where you might expect only nightmarish creatures, lives something unexpectedly adorable. The Dumbo octopus, named for the ear-like fins that protrude from the sides of its head, resembles the flying elephant from the classic Disney film. These small octopuses, usually less than a foot long, hover above the seafloor by flapping these fins, creating a motion that looks remarkably like gentle flying. They drift through the darkness at depths of up to 13,000 feet, deeper than almost any other octopus species, searching for worms, crustaceans, and other small creatures to eat. Their bodies are soft and gelatinous, adapted to the tremendous pressure, and they come in various colors, from bright orange to pale pink to ghostly white. When filmed by deep-sea submersibles, Dumbo octopuses appear curious and calm, sometimes approaching the cameras with what looks like gentle interest. They have large eyes relative to their body size, helping them see in the dim light. Watching footage of these creatures is mesmerizing. They move with such grace and apparent ease, their ear fins flapping slowly, their webbed arms trailing behind them like a parachute. In a realm of bizarre adaptations and alien appearances, the Dumbo octopus is a reminder that even the deep sea can produce something that makes us smile, something that seems almost designed to be endearing. Picture this scene of impossible life, miles below the surface where sunlight has never penetrated, where the ocean floor cracks open and superheated. Water, sometimes exceeding 700 degrees Fahrenheit, pours from the Earth's interior. These are hydrothermal vents, and around them cluster some of the most remarkable ecosystems on our planet. These communities don't rely on photosynthesis like almost all other life on Earth. Instead, they depend on chemosynthesis, where bacteria convert chemicals from the vent water into energy. These bacteria form the foundation of a food web that includes giant tube worms stretching 6 feet long, their red plumes waving in the current, blind white crabs scuttling across rocks, and strange shrimp with no eyes but heat-sensing organs on their backs. The discovery of these ecosystems in 1977 revolutionized our understanding of where life could exist. If life could thrive here, in crushing pressure, scalding heat, and perpetual darkness, independent of the sun, then perhaps life could exist in the subsurface oceans of icy moons around Jupiter and Saturn, or in aquifers deep within Mars. These vents show us that life doesn't need sunshine, it needs only energy, water, and the building blocks of chemistry. The tube worms, blood red and swaying, have no mouth, no stomach, no digestive system, but live in perfect symbiosis with the bacteria inside them, a partnership so complete that neither can survive without the other. In the deep sea where meals are few and far between, evolution has created some extreme solutions to the problem of not wasting an opportunity when food appears. The gulper eel, or pelican eel, has taken this to an astonishing extreme. Its mouth can open to enormous proportions, far wider than its body, creating a gaping maw that resembles a pelican's pouch. When the gulper eel encounters prey, this extraordinary mouth expands to engulf animals larger than the eel itself, and the eel's stomach can stretch to accommodate the meal. The rest of the eel's body is thin and whip-like, ending in a bioluminescent organ that may serve to attract prey or communicate with others. These eels can be several feet long, but most of that length is slender tail. They drift through the water column, their huge mouths open, sometimes using a lure-like light to attract fish or squid into swimming range. Imagine going so long between meals that you needed the ability to swallow something larger than yourself, just to make the most of the rare opportunity. The gulper eel, with its grotesquely oversized mouth and delicate body, embodies the deep sea's rule. When food presents itself, don't let size constraints stop you. It hovers in the darkness, mouth agape, patient and waiting, a living net suspended in the void that hears something wonderful to contemplate. In the deep sea, where darkness is absolute and perpetual, somewhere between 80 to 90% of creatures have evolved the ability to produce their own light. Bioluminescence isn't a rare oddity in the deep ocean, it's the norm, the common language, the primary form of communication in a world without sunlight. These creatures use their living light in countless ways to find mates, sending species-specific patterns flashing through the darkness like Morse code, to lure prey, dangling glowing lures or creating spots of light that curious fish investigate, to startle predators with sudden flashes that allow escape in the confusion, to camouflage themselves through counter-illumination, creating belly lights that match the faint glow from above, erasing their silhouette. Some fish have bioluminescent patterns unique as fingerprints, allowing individuals to recognize each other. Others have light organs they can shutter like flashlights, turning their glow on and off at will. The chemistry of bioluminescence involves luciferin molecules and luciferase enzymes, creating cold light without the heat of fire. Swimming through the deep sea must be like drifting through a silent fireworks display, where every creature is a constellation, where the darkness is punctuated by millions of tiny, purposeful stars, each flash a word in a vast, glowing conversation that humans are only beginning to understand. Let your mind now contemplate eyes the size of dinner plates, the largest eyes of any animal ever known to exist on Earth. The colossal squid, which lives in the deep waters around Antarctica and can reach lengths exceeding 40 feet, possesses eyes that can measure up to 11 inches in diameter. To put that in perspective, that's larger than a basketball. These enormous eyes are designed to capture every available photon in the dim twilight zone where the squid hunts. The size of these eyes gives the colossal squid extraordinary vision, allowing it to detect subtle movements and silhouettes against the faint light filtering from above. Scientists believe these eyes evolved specifically to spot the colossal squid's main predator, sperm whales. The bioluminescent trails and disturbances created by a massive whale moving through the water would be visible to these enormous eyes from significant distances, giving the squid precious warning time to escape. Imagine having eyes so large, so sensitive, that you could see the faintest glow miles away in near total darkness. The colossal squid drifts through the deep, those massive eyes processing the darkness, turning almost invisible photons into sight, searching the void for both prey and danger. When researchers have examined preserved colossal squid, they've found that even in death, those eyes command attention. Windows into a life lived at depths where sunlight is only a distant memory. Now, breathe gently and consider one of nature's most unusual and effective defense mechanisms. The hagfish, an ancient eel-like creature that has remained largely unchanged for 300 million years, produces slime. But this isn't ordinary slime. It's an extraordinary substance that the hagfish can create almost instantaneously when threatened. When a predator bites a hagfish or the hagfish senses danger, glands along its body release small amounts of fiber and protein. When these substances mix with seawater, they expand explosively, creating a massive amount of thick, gel-like slime that can quickly suffocate a predator by clogging its gills. A single hagfish can produce enough slime to turn a bucket of water into a gelatinous mess in seconds. The hagfish itself has a remarkable ability to escape from this slime by literally tying its body into a knot, and sliding the knot from head to tail, scraping the slime off as it goes. Beyond defense, hagfish use this same knotting ability to gain leverage while tearing chunks from dead animals. They're nature's cleanup crew, eating carrion on the ocean floor, but if disturbed, they can transform the water around them into a sticky, viscous nightmare for any predator. It's hard not to respect an animal whose defense is essentially to make everything around it unpleasantly goopy, and it's worked for hundreds of millions of years. Some creatures of the deep sea have found a different solution to the problem of visibility. Don't hide in darkness, become invisible. The glass squid is almost completely transparent, its internal organs barely visible, its body nearly invisible as it drifts through the water. This transparency is an extraordinary adaptation, making the squid extremely difficult for predators to spot. The only non-transparent parts are the eyes and a small digestive gland, which the squid can actually manipulate to reduce their visibility. Some species of glass squid can align these visible parts with their body orientation to minimize their silhouette when viewed from below. They move through the ocean like living glass sculptures, present but unseeable, ghosts in the water. Many glass squid species also possess bioluminescent organs, which might seem to defeat the purpose of transparency, but they use these lights strategically, perhaps to confuse predators or attract prey, while their transparent bodies make it difficult to pinpoint their exact location. Imagine being so perfectly adapted to your environment that you become part of the water itself, neither hidden nor visible, simply dissolving into the medium around you. The glass squid represents one of evolution's most elegant solutions. If you can't hide, disappear. In the deep ocean, time moves differently. Let your breathing match the rhythm I'm about to describe, the slow, graceful pulsing of deep-sea jellyfish drifting through the darkness. These jellies move with an economy of motion that seems almost meditative, each pulse of their bells separated by long pauses. In the deep sea where food is scarce, these jellies have evolved to conserve every bit of energy. They pulse once, drift, pulse again, their movement more like breathing than swimming. Some species have bells several feet across, thin and delicate, trailing tentacles that can extend dozens of feet. These tentacles are covered with stinging cells, and the jelly simply drifts, its tentacles spread like a living net, waiting for small creatures to blunder into them. There's something mesmerizing about watching footage of these jellies. Their movement has an almost hypnotic quality. Pulse and drift, pulse and drift. No wasted motion, no hurry, just the patient, economical movement of a creature that has millions of years of evolution guiding it to conserve energy. They glow with soft bioluminescence, their bells pulsing with light, creating a spectacle that seems designed more for beauty than survival, though the light serves purposes we're still discovering. Watching them is like watching the breath of the deep sea itself, slow, steady, eternal. Here's a small shark, barely longer than your forearm, that has developed one of the ocean's most unusual feeding strategies. The cookie-cutter shark has a unique mouth with large, triangular teeth on the bottom jaw and small teeth on the top. When it finds a large animal, a whale, dolphin, tuna, or even a submarine, it attaches to the victim using its suctorial lips, then spins its body while biting down, using those specialized teeth to carve out a perfectly round plug of flesh, like a cookie cutter removing dough. The resulting wound is circular and neat, a signature mark that scientists have found on animals throughout the ocean. The shark gets a meal without having to kill or overpower something many times its size, and the victim usually survives, the wound eventually healing. Cookie-cutter sharks have been found at depths exceeding 10,000 feet, though they migrate toward the surface at night to feed. They're bioluminescent, glowing with a green light along their bellies, except for a dark collar that might create a silhouette resembling a small fish when viewed from below, attracting larger predators that then become the shark's prey. This tiny shark, with its bizarre feeding method, can take bites from the ocean's largest animals and then disappear back into the darkness. Submarines and underwater cables have even shown cookie-cutter shark bites, their teeth leaving marks in rubber and other materials. Imagine standing so still, so perfectly motionless, that you become part of the landscape. The tripod fish does exactly this. This creature lives on the deep ocean floor, and it has evolved 3 extraordinarily long fins, 2 pelvic fins and an elongated caudal fin, that it uses like stilts to prop itself above the sediment. It faces into the current and simply waits, sometimes for hours or days, elevated just above the seafloor on these stilt-like fins, its body angled into the flow of water. From this position, it waits for tiny crustaceans and other food particles to drift by, which it detects through sensitive organs and snaps up. The tripod fish's patience is extraordinary. It can maintain this position for extended periods, minimizing energy expenditure in an environment where every calorie counts. What's particularly interesting is that many tripod fish are hermaphrodites, possessing both male and female reproductive organs, which makes sense in the deep sea where encountering another of your species might be a rare event. When mating opportunities do arise, any 2 individuals can potentially reproduce. The tripod fish, standing silently in the eternal current, represents deep-sea survival at its most patient. Pick a spot, stand still, and wait for life to come to you. There's something almost meditative about this strategy, a reminder that stillness itself can be a form of action. Now, let your mind drift through deep time. The deep ocean is home to some of Earth's oldest living creatures, not in terms of individual lifespans, but in terms of how long their basic forms have existed largely unchanged. The deep sea is often called a living fossil museum because its stable, unchanging conditions mean there's little evolutionary pressure to alter successful body plans. The hagfish we discussed earlier has remained essentially the same for 300 million years. Certain species of sponges in the deep ocean are believed to be over 10,000 years old as individual organisms, growing imperceptibly slowly in the cold, dark water. Nautiluses, with their beautiful chambered shells, have basic body plans that date back nearly 500 million years. These creatures have witnessed the rise and fall of dinosaurs, the breakup of supercontinents, the creation of mountain ranges, all while living essentially unchanged in the deep ocean's eternal twilight. There's something profound about this continuity, these living threads connecting us to Earth's ancient past. When we look at a nautilus or a hagfish, we're seeing a design so successful, so perfectly adapted to its environment, that hundreds of millions of years have seen no need to improve it. The deep sea preserves not just life, but history itself, written in the bodies of creatures that have mastered their environment so completely that time itself seems to have paused around them. Near hydrothermal vents in the deep ocean lives a creature so unusual it was named after a mythical beast. The Yeti crab has long, hairy-looking claws covered not in hair, but in dense colonies of filamentous bacteria. The crab actively farms these bacteria by waving its claws through the mineral-rich water flowing from the vents, helping the bacteria grow. Then, periodically, the crab uses its specialized mouth parts to harvest and eat the bacteria from its claws. It's essentially tending bacterial gardens on its own body, a farming strategy that wouldn't be discovered until 2005 when these crabs were first observed near vents along the Pacific-Antarctic ridge. The Yeti crab doesn't have eyes. It lives in complete darkness, navigating its world through other senses, feeling its way across rocks near vents that would be lethally hot to most creatures. The bacterial fur on its claws is so dense it genuinely looks like white hair, hence the name Kiwa hirsuta, with Kiwa being a Polynesian goddess and hirsuta meaning hairy. This crab has adapted not just to survive near vents, but to take advantage of them in a completely unique way, cultivating a food source that literally grows on its body. In the deep sea's extreme environment, the Yeti crab has become both farmer and field, carrying its sustenance with it wherever it scuttles through the darkness. Sometimes called a living fossil, the frilled shark is a creature that seems to have swum directly from Earth's ancient oceans into the present day with minimal changes. This shark has a long, eel-like body and a face that looks almost serpentine, with rows of backward-pointing teeth that create a frilled appearance around its mouth, 300 teeth arranged in 25 rows, each tooth designed to snag and hold slippery prey like squid and fish. The frilled shark lives at depths of up to 5,000 feet and can grow to 6 or 7 feet long. Its swimming style is strange, almost primitive, using serpentine body waves rather than the efficient tail-driven swimming of modern sharks. When it hunts, it's believed to coil its body and then strike forward like a snake, using that mouth full of needle-like teeth to ensure its prey doesn't escape. Frilled sharks are rarely seen. Most of our knowledge comes from specimens accidentally caught or from sick individuals that have risen to shallower waters. When you look at photographs of a frilled shark, it's like seeing a window into the past, to the time of early sharks over 80 million years ago. Its body design, its primitive features, its deep-sea habitat, all have protected it from the evolutionary changes that reshape most other sharks. It glides through the darkness unchanged, an ambassador from the ancient oceans. In the darkness of the deep sea, small creatures need extraordinary defenses against predators. The giant ostracod, a sea shrimp about the size of a grape, has developed one of nature's most dramatic escape mechanisms. When threatened, this small crustacean, encased in a translucent shell, can release a glowing cloud of bioluminescent chemicals into the water. This isn't just a brief flash. The chemicals continue glowing for several minutes, creating a bright, expanding cloud that confuses and temporarily blinds predators while the ostracod jets away under cover of its own light show. The bioluminescent display is surprisingly bright and can be blue or green, creating what one researcher described as little underwater fireworks. The ostracod can produce multiple clouds if needed, each one buying it precious seconds to escape. What's remarkable is the sophistication of this defense. The chemicals react with seawater, not inside the ostracod's body, meaning the creature isn't using its own body's resources to create the light, just carrying the ingredients and mixing them at the moment of release. Imagine being able to create glowing smoke screens at will, bright enough to blind and confuse anything chasing you. In the deep sea where light is rare and precious, a sudden explosion of bioluminescence can be as disorienting as a flash bang in a dark room. Of all the strange creatures in the deep ocean, few capture the imagination quite like the big fin squid. These squid have been filmed only a handful of times, always in very deep water, usually by remotely operated vehicles. What makes them so remarkable are their arms and tentacles, which are extraordinarily long, not just long relative to their body, but absurdly, impossibly long. In videos, these appendages trail below the squid's small body for distances estimated at up to 26 feet, creating an appearance that's both graceful and otherworldly. The squid holds these appendages in a peculiar position, bent at right angles like elbows, with the ends hanging straight down. They drift just above the seafloor, those incredibly long arms trailing below like delicate threads, and it's believed they use these appendages to catch small creatures on or just above the bottom. The squid's body is small, almost trivial compared to the dramatic length of its arms, giving it an appearance unlike any other cephalopod. Every video of big fin squid has a dreamlike, almost unsettling quality. The creature moves slowly, its impossibly long arms trailing in the current, and it seems less like a living animal and more like something from a surreal painting. We know almost nothing about these creatures' lives, their hunting strategies, their reproduction. They remain one of the deep sea's most mysterious residents. At the bottom of the ocean, often at depths exceeding 3 miles, wanders one of the sea's most endearingly strange creatures. The sea pig is actually a type of sea cucumber, and it looks exactly like you might imagine. A plump, pinkish body about 6 inches long, walking on small tube feet that resemble legs, with tentacles extending from one end. Sea pigs gather in groups, sometimes hundreds of individuals together, slowly moving across the abyssal plains eating organic particles from the seafloor. They use their tentacles to shovel food into their mouths, and they're remarkably efficient at extracting nutrition from the marine snow that falls from above. What's particularly endearing about sea pigs is their social behavior. They tend to face the same direction, into the current, and they often travel in loose herds. Researchers aren't entirely sure why they cluster, but it might relate to finding areas with better food supplies or possibly to reproductive benefits. When you watch videos of sea pigs, there's something oddly charming about their slow, deliberate movement, the way they waddle along on their tube feet, their plump bodies swaying slightly. They're completely harmless, going about their business of cleaning the seafloor, turning death and debris into life. In the harshest environment on Earth, the sea pig leads a gentle, peaceful existence, a reminder that even in the abyss, life can be soft and unhurried. Let's pause for a moment and truly contemplate what pressure means in the deep ocean. At the surface, we experience 1 atmosphere of pressure, 14.7 pounds per square inch. For every 33 feet you descend in the ocean, the pressure increases by 1 atmosphere. At the deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench's Challenger Deep, you're nearly 7 miles down, and the pressure exceeds 1,000 atmospheres, over 15,000 pounds per square inch. That's roughly equivalent to 50 jumbo jets stacked on top of every square inch of your body. To put it another way, if you could somehow be transported to these depths, the pressure would compress you to the size of a small marble. Yet creatures live here. They've evolved bodies with no air spaces that could be crushed, cellular structures that function under these extraordinary conditions, proteins that maintain their shapes despite pressure that would denature most complex molecules. What's remarkable is that these deep-sea creatures aren't experiencing pressure in the way we imagine. Their bodies are perfectly adapted. The pressure inside matches the pressure outside. They no more feel the weight of the ocean than you feel the weight of the atmosphere pressing on you right now. To them, this crushing environment is simply home, as comfortable and natural as your living room is to you. If you brought them to the surface too quickly, they would experience the same decompression problems a diver would. Their bodies adapted so completely to pressure that its absence becomes dangerous. The deep ocean teaches us that extreme is relative, that what seems impossible from one perspective is merely normal from another. Imagine living in a place where simply existing requires your body to withstand forces that would obliterate most known materials, and doing it so effortlessly you never even notice. When you think of fearsome predators, you might imagine great white sharks or orcas, but relative to body size, one of the most dramatically armed creatures in the ocean is a fish barely 6 inches long. The fat-toothed fish has teeth so disproportionately large for its body that it cannot fully close its mouth. Its lower fangs are so long that the fish has special sockets on either side of its brain to accommodate them when its mouth closes, preventing the teeth from piercing its own brain. This small, dark fish lives at depths between 1,600 and 6,500 feet, where its enormous teeth help it seize any prey it encounters in the sparse deep sea. The fangtootha's appearance is the stuff of nightmares, with those prominent fangs, small eyes, and a generally hostile appearance, but in reality it's a small, somewhat pathetic creature struggling to find enough food in a vast, empty environment. Those massive teeth represent evolutionary desperation. When food is rare, you cannot afford to let anything escape once you've caught it. The fat-tooth hunts by swimming with its mouth open, and when it contacts prey, those teeth ensure there's no escape. Despite its frightening appearance, the fat-tooth is completely harmless to humans and spends its life in the cold darkness, those disproportionate fangs the only weapon it has against an ocean that offers few meals. It's a reminder that the most fearsome-looking creatures are often simply doing their best to survive in difficult circumstances. Drift now through time with me, back 500 million years to when the oceans were full of creatures encased in coiled shells. Most of them are gone now, extinct for hundreds of millions of years, but a few descendants remain, and among them is the chambered nautilus. This creature's shell, with its perfect logarithmic spiral and mother-of-pearl interior, has remained essentially unchanged since before fish had jaws, before plants colonized land, before insects learned to fly. The nautilus uses this shell in a remarkably sophisticated way. It's divided into chambers, and the nautilus lives in the outermost chamber, using the others for buoyancy control. By adjusting the ratio of gas to liquid in these chambers, the nautilus can rise or sink in the water column, an internal ballast system of extraordinary elegance. The nautilus itself has up to 90 simple tentacles that it uses to catch prey, and unlike its relatives the octopuses and squid, it has a simple eye without a lens, essentially a pinhole camera. It moves by jet propulsion, drawing water in and expelling it forcefully. Everything about the nautilus speaks to ancient success. Its design was so effective that evolution saw no reason to alter it substantially. When you hold a nautilus shell and trace that perfect spiral with your finger, you're touching a pattern that has persisted through multiple mass extinctions, through the complete rearrangement of continents, through climate shifts that would be unimaginable to us. The nautilus is a living connection to Earth's deep past. Here's something extraordinary. most deep-sea creatures that produce bioluminescence create blue or green light, because these colors travel farthest through water. But dragonfish have evolved a unique adaptation. They produce red bioluminescence. Why does this matter? Because most deep-sea creatures cannot see red light. In the deep ocean, red appears black, invisible. This means dragonfish have essentially evolved a private spotlight that only they can see. They have special pigments in their eyes that allow them to detect red wavelengths, while their prey and competitors remain blind to it. The dragonfish uses this red light like night vision goggles, illuminating the world around it while remaining invisible to everything else. Imagine having a flashlight that only you could see the light from. You could search for prey or navigate your environment, while remaining completely hidden in what everyone else perceives as total darkness. The dragonfish is a long, serpentine creature with large teeth and a bioluminescent lure dangling from its chin. And this combination, the lure to attract prey and the red light to see while remaining unseen, makes it a formidable predator. Evolution has given the dragonfish something close to a superpower: the ability to see in a color frequency that essentially doesn't exist for any other creature in its environment. It swims through the darkness, casting red light that illuminates its world while leaving it invisible to prey. The pelican eel is another creature whose appearance seems designed to maximize our sense of wonder and strangeness. Like the gulper eel, it has an enormous mouth and a long, whip-like tail, but what makes it particularly remarkable is how dramatically different the larvae are from the adults. Young pelican eels, called leptocephalus larvae, are flat, transparent, ribbon-like creatures that look nothing like their adult forms. They drift in the open ocean for months, slowly transforming through metamorphosis into the bizarre adults. The adult pelican eel has a tiny brain, small eyes, and a body that's mostly mouth and tail. That enormous mouth can unhinge to swallow prey that seems impossibly large, and the stomach expands to accommodate these meals. The tail ends in a complex bioluminescent organ that may serve multiple purposes: attracting prey, attracting mates, or possibly even as a decoy to predators. What's particularly striking about pelican eels is that despite their frightening appearance, they're relatively rare, and scientists still don't fully understand their life cycle, their reproductive strategies, or many aspects of their behavior. They've been photographed by deep-sea vehicles drifting in the water column, that massive mouth open, patiently waiting, a living embodiment of the deep sea's rule that you must be prepared to eat anything, no matter how large, because opportunities are too rare to waste. In 2017, scientists working in the Mariana Trench filmed a snailfish at a depth of 26,830 feet, over 5 miles down. This delicate, translucent creature, about the size of a large goldfish, holds the record as the deepest fish ever recorded. It glided gracefully past the camera, apparently unfazed by pressure that would instantly crush almost any other vertebrate. Snailfish have evolved specifically for these extreme depths. Their bodies contain high concentrations of a chemical called trimethylamine oxide, which helps stabilize proteins and cellular structures under extreme pressure. They have no scales, no swim bladder, which would be crushed at these depths, and their bones are poorly calcified, giving them flexibility. These fish hunt small crustaceans in the trenches, and despite living in one of Earth's harshest environments, they appear delicate, almost ethereal, in the footage captured of them. Scientists believe there may be a depth limit beyond which fish cannot survive, possibly around 27,000 to 28,000 feet, where the pressure becomes too great even for these specialized proteins to function. But the snailfish, swimming at depths where mountains on land would be dwarfed by the weight of water above, represents life's extraordinary ability to adapt to conditions that seem absolutely impossible. It's a reminder that the ocean's depths are not a lifeless void but a challenging environment that life has nevertheless conquered. Each spring in Toyama Bay, Japan, one of nature's most beautiful spectacles occurs. Millions of firefly squid rise from depths of 1,200 feet to spawn in the shallower waters. And when they do, they create a display of bioluminescence so extensive that it lights up the ocean in waves of blue light. These small squid, about 3 inches long, are covered with bioluminescent organs called photophores, tiny light-producing organs that dot their tentacles and body. They can control these lights individually or flash them in coordinated patterns. During the spawning season, you can stand on the beach and watch the waves glow with blue light, millions of squid creating a luminous display that has made this phenomenon one of Japan's most celebrated natural events. The firefly squid uses its bioluminescence for multiple purposes: counter-illumination to hide from predators below, flashing patterns to attract mates, and possibly coordinated displays to confuse predators during spawning. But beyond the practical purposes, there's something transcendent about watching the ocean glow with the light of millions of tiny creatures, each one carrying its own constellation of lights. It's a reminder that bioluminescence, for all its evolutionary purposes, creates beauty that takes our breath away. The people of Toyama Bay have celebrated this annual occurrence for centuries, and it's been designated a special natural monument. Standing on that beach, watching the glowing waves, you're witnessing the meeting of earth and ocean, darkness and light, individual and multitude. In the deep waters, usually between 1,000 and 4,000 feet, swims a shark that looks like it came from another planet. The goblin shark has a long, flat, blade-like snout, small eyes, and a protrusible jaw that can shoot forward from its face to grab prey. When the goblin shark detects prey, special ligaments and muscles allow its jaws to extend dramatically outward from its skull, creating a suction effect that draws the prey into its mouth. In an instant, those jaws snap back into place. This remarkable adaptation allows the goblin shark to catch prey with surprising speed despite being a generally slow-moving animal. The goblin shark's appearance is striking. It's usually a pinkish-white color due to blood vessels visible through semi-transparent skin, and that long, flat rostrum gives it an almost prehistoric appearance. Scientists believe the rostrum may be studded with electroreceptors that help the shark detect prey in the darkness. Goblin sharks are rarely seen. Most of what we know comes from specimens accidentally caught by deep-sea fishermen. When you watch footage of a goblin shark extending its jaws, it's both fascinating and unsettling. Those jaws shoot out like something from a science fiction film, transforming the shark's face completely for a split second before snapping back. It's a reminder that the deep sea has evolved solutions to hunting that are unlike anything we see in shallow waters, adaptations so unusual they challenge our understanding of what's possible. Near hydrothermal vents, where the Earth's interior heat meets the ocean's cold depths, you'll find dense colonies of squat lobsters crowding around the warm water outlets. These creatures, which are more closely related to hermit crabs than true lobsters despite their name, can be found in such high densities near vents that they carpet the rocks in writhing masses. A single vent might host tens of thousands of individuals, all jostling for position near the nutrient-rich water. They're not there for the warmth, precisely, but for the bacteria that grow in the vent outflow. The squat lobsters have specially adapted filtering appendages that they use to catch and eat these bacteria. They live in one of the most hostile environments imaginable, near water hot enough to melt lead, in complete darkness, under crushing pressure, yet they thrive in such numbers that they sometimes exclude other species simply by taking up all available space. What's particularly interesting is that different species of squat lobsters have evolved to occupy slightly different temperature zones around vents. Some live right at the edge of the scalding water, where they can harvest the most bacteria but risk being cooked. Others live farther out in cooler water, safer but with less abundant food. This creates a visible zonation pattern around vents, different species arranged in rings by temperature tolerance, each one pushing the boundaries of heat and chemical tolerance in their quest for survival. Since its discovery in 1976, fewer than 100 megamouth sharks have ever been seen. This enormous filter-feeding shark, which can exceed 16 feet in length and weigh more than a ton, was completely unknown to science until one became accidentally entangled with a U.S. Navy ship's anchor off Hawaii. The megamouth is so rare and elusive that each sighting is considered a significant scientific event. It has a massive head with a luminescent stripe inside its mouth, which scientists believe may attract prey. The shark swims with its enormous mouth open, filtering krill, jellyfish, and small fish from the water. Unlike other filter-feeding sharks that swim continuously, the megamouth appears to be a relatively slow swimmer, and it's believed to undergo daily vertical migrations, following its prey toward the surface at night and descending to deeper waters during the day. Everything about the megamouth, from its large, soft body to its bulbous head, seems designed for slow, efficient filtering in deep water. The fact that a shark this large remained unknown to science until so recently, and remains so rarely seen, tells us something humbling about how much of the ocean remains a mystery. Somewhere in the deep waters right now, megamouth sharks are swimming slowly through the darkness, their massive mouths agape, and we know almost nothing about their lives, their populations, or their full range. They remind us that the ocean still holds secrets, still harbors creatures we've barely glimpsed. Picture a fish that looks like it's made of silver, with a body so thin it appears almost two-dimensional from the front. The hatchetfish, named for its resemblance to the blade of a hatchet, lives in the twilight zone of the ocean, and it's evolved one of the most sophisticated camouflage systems in nature. Its body is covered with mirror-like scales that reflect the environment, and its belly is studded with bioluminescent organs. This combination creates perfect counter-illumination camouflage. When a predator looks up at the hatchetfish from below, it would normally see a dark silhouette against the faint light from above. But the hatchetfish's bioluminescent belly lights match exactly the amount and quality of light coming from above, making the fish effectively invisible from below. The mirror scales help it blend in when viewed from the sides. It's an extraordinarily sophisticated adaptation. The fish must continuously adjust the intensity of its belly lights as the ambient light changes, maintaining perfect camouflage at all times. Hatchetfish also have tubular eyes that point upward, allowing them to watch for prey silhouetted against the faint light while they remain hidden. These strange, blade-thin fish drift through the twilight zone, their lights flickering to match the environment, invisible despite swimming in the open water. They remind us that camouflage isn't always about blending into a background. Sometimes it's about precisely matching the light itself. Let your breathing slow as we contemplate time in the deep sea. In the cold, dark, food-scarce environment of the deep ocean, many creatures have evolved extraordinarily slow metabolisms. Some deep-sea fish grow so slowly that they might take decades to reach maturity. The orange roughy, a deep-sea fish that was heavily overfished before scientists understood its biology, can live for over 200 years and doesn't reach reproductive maturity until it's 20 to 30 years old. This slow life history made this species extremely vulnerable to fishing pressure. By the time we realized what was happening, populations had been decimated. Deep-sea sharks similarly grow slowly and reproduce rarely. The Greenland shark is thought to reach sexual maturity at around 150 years of age and can live for over 400 years, making it the longest-lived vertebrate known. In the deep sea, life is lived at a different pace entirely. Chemical reactions proceed more slowly in cold water. Food is scarce enough that there's no advantage to fast metabolism, and the absence of seasons means there's no environmental pressure to time life events to particular periods. A deep-sea creature might experience its life as we experience ours, but from our perspective, they're living in slow motion, their lives stretching across centuries. It's a different relationship with time, one that makes these creatures particularly vulnerable to human impacts but also gives them a kind of timeless quality, as if they're only partially connected to the flow of time that governs surface life. In the deep sea, eyes have evolved into remarkable forms, but few are as distinctive as those of the telescope octopus. This small, translucent octopus has tubular eyes that protrude from its head like actual telescopes, giving it binocular vision and excellent depth perception. The eyes can rotate somewhat independently, allowing the octopus to scan its environment efficiently. The octopus's body is so transparent that you can see its internal organs, and when it's illuminated, it glows with an otherworldly quality. Like many deep-sea octopuses, it has serrate appendages, small finger-like protrusions that may help it sense its environment or manipulate prey. The telescope octopus drifts through the water column, those distinctive tubular eyes giving it an appearance that's both comical and alien. Scientists believe these eyes are adapted to detect the faint bioluminescence of prey and predators in the twilight zone. The octopus itself can produce light, though its transparent body means it must be careful about when and how it uses bioluminescence, as it could make itself highly visible. Watching footage of telescope octopuses is mesmerizing. They move with the graceful pulsing typical of pelagic octopuses, their bodies nearly invisible except for those prominent eyes and the shadowy hint of internal organs. They seem less like creatures and more like drifting eyes, watching the darkness with patient attention. Near hydrothermal vents, chemistry creates sculptures that look like alien gardens. When the superhot, mineral-rich water from vents meets the cold ocean water, dissolved minerals precipitate out, forming chimney-like structures that can grow dozens of feet tall. These chimneys aren't alive, but they're the foundation for living communities. Some vents create white smokers, where lower temperature water creates light-colored mineral deposits. Others create black smokers, where higher temperatures precipitate dark minerals that billow out like smoke. These structures grow constantly as long as the vent is active, sometimes several inches per day. The minerals precipitating out include sulfides of iron, copper, and zinc, and these deposits can be rich enough that mining companies have begun exploring the possibility of deep-sea mining, a prospect that concerns biologists who worry about the impact on these unique ecosystems. But beyond the practicality, there's something beautiful about these chemical gardens. Imagine standing in a submarine near a black smoker. The water around you is clear and cold, maybe 35 degrees Fahrenheit. But from a crack in the seafloor pours black fluid at 700 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature gradient is so steep that the hot and cold water don't mix immediately. And all around, these towering mineral chimneys rise from the seafloor, growing slowly, creating architecture through chemistry alone. It's a reminder that not everything beautiful in the ocean is alive. In the deep sea's twilight zone swims a fish whose teeth are so long they don't fit inside its mouth. The viperfish has fangs that can be up to half the length of its body, needle-sharp teeth that curve backward. When its mouth is closed, which is rare, the lower fangs extend up alongside the outside of its head, nearly reaching its eyes. These teeth are designed for one purpose, ensuring that any prey the viperfish catches cannot escape. The viperfish is a relatively small fish, usually less than a foot long, but it's a fierce predator, using a bioluminescent lure on a modified spine extending from its dorsal fin to attract prey. When a curious fish investigates the light, the viperfish strikes with remarkable speed, those enormous teeth impaling the victim. What's particularly interesting about viperfish is their jaw mechanics. They can unhinge their jaws and flex their skull to accommodate prey that seems far too large, and their stomach can expand dramatically. Like many deep-sea predators, they follow the principle of never refusing a meal, no matter the size, because the next opportunity might be days or weeks away. The viperfish swims through the darkness, those enormous teeth gleaming if caught in a light, looking less like a fish and more like a demon from mythology. Yet despite their fearsome appearance, they're small, rarely seen creatures that spend their lives in a constant search for food in an environment that offers little. Those massive teeth are not weapons of aggression but tools of desperation, ensuring survival and scarcity. Now let your mind embrace something truly otherworldly. Sea spiders, despite their name, are not true spiders but belong to a group called pycnogonids. In shallow waters, they're small and easily overlooked, but in the deep sea, they can grow to enormous sizes, with leg spans exceeding 2 feet. These creatures are almost all legs. Their bodies are so tiny that some of their organs actually extend into their legs because there's not enough room in the central body. They have anywhere from 8 to 12 legs depending on species, and they walk across the seafloor with an uncanny, deliberate gait that's simultaneously graceful and unsettling. Sea spiders have a proboscis that they use to pierce soft body prey like anemones and sponges, sucking out the internal fluids. They don't have respiratory or circulatory systems in the conventional sense. Instead, gas exchange occurs directly through their exoskeleton, and they rely on diffusion to move oxygen through their bodies. Watching footage of giant sea spiders moving across the seafloor is mesmerizing. They move so slowly and deliberately, each leg placed with what seems like careful consideration, their tiny bodies suspended above the bottom on those impossibly long, thin legs. They look like something designed by an artist who wanted to create the most alien-looking creature imaginable, while still maintaining a certain terrible grace. In the deep sea, where body plans can be radically different from anything on land, the sea spider reminds us that evolution has no attachment to forms we find familiar or comfortable. Some deep-sea fish have evolved eyes unlike anything else in nature. The spookfish has eyes divided into 2 parts, an upper section with a lens like a normal eye, and a lower section that uses curved mirrors to focus light. This makes the spookfish the only known vertebrate to use mirrors in its eyes. The mirror is made of tiny crystals of guanine arranged in layers, and it reflects light onto the retina with remarkable efficiency. This dual system allows the spookfish to look up with its lensed eyes to spot prey or predators silhouetted against the faint light from above, while simultaneously using its mirror eyes to look down and to the sides. It's an extraordinarily sophisticated solution to the problem of seeing in near total darkness. The spookfish, a type of barrel eye, has a tubular body and those characteristic reflecting eyes that give it an appearance both bizarre and beautiful. When researchers first discovered the mirror system in spookfish eyes, they were astounded. It was thought impossible that a vertebrate eye could use reflection rather than just refraction to form images. But the spookfish had evolved this solution independently, demonstrating once again that the deep sea drives innovation in ways that surface habitats simply don't. The spookfish drifts through the twilight zone, its mirror eyes gathering every available photon, seeing a world invisible to most creatures. Though whale sharks are filter feeders that spend much of their time near the surface, they're capable of diving to depths exceeding 6,000 feet, entering the deep sea realm. These gentle giants, the largest fish in the ocean, can grow over 40 feet long and weigh more than 40 tons, yet they eat some of the smallest creatures in the sea, filtering plankton, small fish, and fish eggs from the water. When whale sharks dive deep, scientists believe they may be thermoregulating, cooling off in the cold deep water before returning to the surface, or possibly feeding on deep water prey. Whale sharks have distinctive white spots and stripes on their dark backs, patterns that are unique to each individual, like fingerprints. Despite their enormous size, they're docile and curious, often allowing divers to swim alongside them. There's something profoundly moving about encountering a whale shark, an animal whose size should be intimidating but whose gentle nature and slow, purposeful movements create a sense of peace rather than fear. The fact that these massive creatures can navigate from the sunlit surface to the deep sea with ease, spanning environments that would be lethal to most animals, speaks to their remarkable adaptations. They remind us that the ocean's realms are not strictly separated. Many creatures move between them, connecting the surface and the abyss through their daily lives. In the deep sea near the ocean floor lives a fish that has become something of an internet celebrity for its unusual appearance. The blobfish, or blob sculpin, has a gelatinous, almost pudding-like body with a face that appears perpetually sad or grumpy. But here's what most people don't understand. The blobfish looks quite different in its natural habitat. At depths of 2,000 to 4,000 feet, where pressure is intense, the blobfish's gelatinous body gives it a density slightly less than the surrounding water, allowing it to float just above the seafloor without expending energy swimming. It sits and waits for prey to drift by, then opens its mouth and sucks the unfortunate creature in. The famous blob appearance that made it an internet sensation actually comes from decompression damage. When brought rapidly to the surface, its body structure collapses without the surrounding pressure to support it, creating that sagged, blobby appearance. In its natural environment, the blobfish looks more like a normal, if somewhat odd, fish. It's a reminder that we should be careful about judging deep-sea creatures by how they look when removed from their environment. The adaptations that make them perfect for life under extreme pressure can make them appear strange or even grotesque when subjected to surface conditions. The blobfish, resting on the deep seafloor, is perfectly adapted to its world, a world where being gelatinous is an advantage, where density that matches water is the key to effortless survival. On the bones of whale falls live some of the strangest creatures in the ocean. Ostacs, commonly called zombie worms or bone-eating worms, are small worms that bore into whale bones to access the lipids stored within. The female worms have no mouth, no stomach, and no anus. Instead, they have root-like structures that penetrate the bones, and inside these roots live symbiotic bacteria that break down the bone fats, providing nutrients to the worm. Male ostacs are microscopic and live inside the female's tubes, sometimes dozens of males to a single female, their sole purpose being reproduction. The discovery of ostacs raised fascinating questions. If these worms evolved specifically to consume whale bones, what happened before whales evolved? Some scientists believe similar animals may have fed on the bones of marine reptiles during the age of dinosaurs. Ostacs are found on whale falls worldwide, different species specializing in different types of bones or different stages of whale decomposition. When you see photos of whale bones on the seafloor, often they're covered with what looks like pink or red fuzz. Those are the plumes of ostacs worms, sometimes tens of thousands of individuals on a single skeleton. They're turning something that seems completely inedible, bare bones, into sustenance. Another reminder that the deep sea wastes nothing, that every possible source of energy has some organism specialized to exploit it. These zombie worms, with their strange anatomy and stranger lifestyle, represent deep sea specialization taken to its furthest extreme. Swimming in the deep waters, sometimes at depths exceeding 8,000 feet, is a shark that has barely changed in 200 million years. The blunt-nosed six-gill shark is one of the most primitive shark species still alive, recognizable by its 6 gill slits. Most modern sharks have 5, and its prehistoric-looking body. These sharks can grow over 15 feet long and are ambush predators, lying in wait or moving slowly until prey comes within reach, then striking with surprising speed. They hunt fish, squid, and even other sharks. What's particularly interesting is that 6-gill sharks perform daily vertical migrations, rising from the deep at night to feed in shallow waters and returning to the depths during the day. This migration might help them avoid competition with more modern, faster-swimming shark species that dominate shallow waters during the day. When you look at a 6-gill shark, you're seeing a body plan that worked so well it needed almost no modification across hundreds of millions of years. They swam in the oceans when dinosaurs walked on land. They survived the mass extinction that killed the dinosaurs. They've witnessed the rise of mammals, the formation and breakup of supercontinents, the coming and going of ice ages. Yet they continue essentially unchanged, masters of the deep water, patient predators in the darkness. They remind us that sometimes the old ways are the best ways, that not every species needs to evolve dramatically to succeed. In the deep Gulf of Mexico, at depths around 10,000 feet, scientists discovered something that challenged our understanding of sponges. The ping-pong tree sponge, officially Chondrocladia lampidiglobus, is a carnivorous sponge shaped like a candelabra with small spheres on the ends of branches. Each sphere is covered with small hooks, and when tiny crustaceans or other small animals touch these hooks, they become entangled. The sponge then slowly digests them externally, absorbing the nutrients through its surface. This is remarkable because most sponges filter tiny particles from water. They're not active predators. But in the nutrient-poor deep sea, this sponge has evolved a strategy of actively capturing prey. The ping-pong balls at the ends of branches may also contain developing embryos, making these structures serve dual purposes. The sponge's tree-like structure helps it rise above the seafloor, presenting more surface area to the current, and increasing its chances of capturing prey. When you see images of ping-pong tree sponges, they look more like some kind of surreal coral or deep-sea plant than a sponge. They're ghostly white, branching in complex patterns, those spheres at the tips giving them an appearance that's simultaneously beautiful and slightly ominous. They remind us that even organisms we think we understand completely, like sponges, can evolve strategies so unusual they force us to reconsider our definitions. In the deep sea, the most common fish you'll encounter isn't some bizarre nightmare creature but a relatively normal-looking fish called a grenadier or rat tail. These fish are the dominant fish species in many deep-sea environments, sometimes making up the majority of fish biomass at depths below 6,500 feet. Grenadiers get their name from their long, tapering tails that narrow to a point, giving them a tadpole-like silhouette. They have large heads with prominent eyes and sensory organs, and they swim by undulating their long tails, hovering just above the seafloor searching for food. What makes grenadiers so successful in the deep sea is their generalist strategy. They'll eat almost anything they encounter, from small crustaceans to marine snow to carrion. They're also highly sensitive to vibrations and smells, allowing them to locate food sources from considerable distances in the darkness. Some species can detect the faint electrical fields generated by living creatures buried in the sediment. Grenadiers live in a world where most organisms are highly specialized, adapted to exploit specific niches, yet they've succeeded by being adaptable, by taking whatever opportunities the deep sea offers. When deep-sea cameras are lowered to the ocean floor, grenadiers are often the first fish to appear, drawn by the disturbance, or perhaps investigating the lights. They swim with an almost casual grace, their long tails undulating, their movements unhurried. In the competition for survival in the deep sea, they've won not through bizarre adaptations but through flexibility and persistence, traits that work in any environment, at any depth. Near hydrothermal vents in the deep Pacific lives a blind crab covered in what appears to be fur. The Yeti crab, which we touched on earlier, has a cousin called Kiwa hirsuta, and both species perform a peculiar behavior that researchers call dancing. These crabs wave their hairy arms through the mineral-rich water flowing from vents, and those hairs are actually covered in filamentous bacteria that the crabs are cultivating. By waving their arms, the crabs are essentially farming, ensuring the bacteria get optimal exposure to the nutrients and chemicals in the vent water. But the motion looks remarkably like dancing, the crabs swaying their arms rhythmically in the current, and there's something oddly beautiful about it. These crabs have no eyes, living in absolute darkness, navigating their world through chemical and touch sensors. The vents they live near would cook them if they got too close, yet they need to stay near enough to harvest the bacteria. So they occupy a precise zone where temperature and chemistry balance. Watching footage of Yeti crabs dancing near vents, their white, hairy arms waving in unison, it's easy to forget these are blind creatures living under crushing pressure and scalding water. They appear to be engaged in some kind of ritual, some kind of celebration, though they're simply farming. It's a reminder that we often project human interpretations onto animal behaviors, seeing dance where there is only feeding, seeing community where there is only coincidental gathering. Yet perhaps there's a truth in that projection. In its own way, the Yeti crab is celebrating life, waving its arms in the darkness, harvesting sustenance from an environment that should be barren. At this midpoint in our journey, let's contemplate something delicate and vulnerable. In the deep sea lives a sea cucumber whose body is almost completely transparent. You can see its internal organs, its digestive system processing food, its water vascular system pumping. This transparency serves as camouflage in the open water where these holothurians drift, feeding on particles. But it also makes them appear extraordinarily vulnerable, as if they're creatures without defenses, without protection, simply existing in the ocean's vastness through some kind of luck. Yet these transparent sea cucumbers have survived for millions of years. Their very transparency is their shield, making them nearly invisible to predators. Some species can also produce bioluminescent displays when disturbed, creating glowing patterns along their bodies that might startle attackers. They drift through the water column using swimming appendages, their bodies contracting and expanding in slow, rhythmic motions. There's something almost meditative about watching them move, these creatures that seem too delicate to exist in the harsh deep sea yet persist nevertheless. They remind us that vulnerability itself can be a kind of strength, that sometimes the best defense is not armor but invisibility, not resistance but transparency. In a world that values toughness and protection, the transparent sea cucumber survives through the opposite strategy. By being so insubstantial it's almost not there, by allowing the world to see through it completely, by maintaining no barriers between inside and outside, self and environment. Let your mind drift now through the concept of living fossils, organisms whose basic body plans have remained essentially unchanged for tens or hundreds of millions of years. The deep sea is full of them. The nautilus we discussed earlier, unchanged for 500 million years. The horseshoe crab, which isn't actually a crab but a relative of spiders, with a body plan unchanged for 450 million years. Glass sponges building silica skeletons in deep water using techniques unchanged since before complex animals existed. These creatures are often called living fossils, though scientists debate whether that term is accurate, as all organisms continue evolving even if their basic form remains similar. But there's something profound about encountering an animal whose ancestors looked essentially identical when trilobites ruled the seas, when the first fish were developing jaws, when plants were just beginning to colonize land. In the deep sea's stable, unchanging environment, there's been little pressure for dramatic redesign. Success in these depths comes from efficiency, from doing one thing well and continuing to do it across eons. When you see a chambered nautilus or a horseshoe crab, you're not just seeing an individual animal. You're seeing a design that has worked so well for so long that evolution has approved it across deep time, stamped it with the seal of good enough, and moved on to experiment elsewhere. These creatures are bridges between the ancient past and the present, living proof that sometimes perfection is achieved early and maintained forever. We've touched on anglerfish before, but let's dive deeper into their remarkable lure. The anglerfish's luminescent lure, called an esca, dangles from a modified spine on its head and glows through bioluminescence produced by symbiotic bacteria living inside it. The anglerfish can control the light, making it pulse or glow steadily, and different species have differently shaped lures, some resembling small fish or shrimp, others looking like simple glowing orbs. The anglerfish sits motionless on the seafloor or suspended in the water column, conserving energy, while that lure draws curious prey close to its enormous mouth. What's particularly fascinating is that the bacteria in the lure are species-specific. Particular anglerfish species host particular bacteria species, and scientists aren't entirely sure how the fish initially acquire these bacteria or how they maintain the proper bacterial population. Some researchers believe newly hatched anglerfish might acquire their luminescent bacteria from the environment, while others think they might be passed from mother to offspring. The lure itself can be complex, with fleshy appendages that move in the current, creating a more lifelike appearance. An anglerfish sitting in the darkness, its lure glowing, is essentially fishing, dangling bait and waiting with eternal patience for something to bite. It's a strategy that requires almost no energy expenditure, perfect for an environment where food is scarce and the next meal might be days or weeks away. The anglerfish has turned the deep sea's darkness into an advantage, using it to hide everything except the one thing it wants prey to see. In the deep sea drifts one of the longest creatures on Earth, though calling it a single creature isn't quite accurate. The giant siphonophore is actually a colony of specialized individuals called zooids, each performing specific functions but all connected and working together. Some zooids are specialized for swimming, pulsing in coordinated waves to move the colony. Others are specialized for feeding, with tentacles covered in stinging cells to catch prey. Still others handle reproduction or provide structure. A giant siphonophore can stretch over 100 feet long, though it's thin and delicate, arranged in a long, spiral formation that drifts through the water. Each zooid is genetically identical to all the others, all clones from a single parent organism, yet they're specialized to perform different functions through developmental processes. Is this one organism or many? The question becomes philosophical. The siphonophore behaves as a unit, yet it's composed of individuals. It's like a single entity distributed across 100-foot length, a living contradiction. When you watch footage of siphonophores, they're often bioluminescent, glowing with waves of blue-green light that travel along their length, creating a spectacle like an underwater aurora. They're both beautiful and alien, challenging our definitions of what constitutes an individual organism. In the deep sea, where life faces extreme challenges, even the concept of individuality becomes flexible. Most jellyfish are passive feeders, using stinging tentacles to capture prey that blunders into them. But there's a deep-sea jellyfish called benthochodon that has evolved an active hunting strategy. This small, bell-shaped jelly has a bright red body and relatively short tentacles, and it actively swims after prey, primarily copepods and other small crustaceans. When it locates a target, it uses its tentacles like arms to manipulate and position the prey before consuming it. This active predation strategy is unusual among jellies and requires significantly more energy than passive feeding, but apparently it's effective enough in the deep sea's sparse environment that benthochodon has successfully maintained this lifestyle. The jelly's red coloration is also interesting. In the deep sea, red light doesn't penetrate, so red animals appear black, making them essentially invisible. But benthochodon also has bioluminescent organs that can flash, possibly to startle prey or predators. It's a jelly that has broken several of the rules that govern its relatives, adopting an active lifestyle in an environment that usually favors energy conservation, choosing red coloration when most deep-sea creatures are either transparent or darker colors, combining active hunting with bioluminescent displays. It reminds us that even within a single group of animals, there are innovators, species that try different strategies. And sometimes those experiments succeed despite seeming to contradict conventional wisdom about how life should work in the deep sea. Let's return to the adorable Dumbo octopus and understand more about how it lives. These octopuses hover above the seafloor using their ear-like fins, But when they locate prey, they descend in pounce, spreading their webbed arms like a parachute to trap anything underneath. Then they use their arms to guide food to their mouths. They eat amphipods, worms, and other small invertebrates, hunting with a gentle patience that matches their appearance. What's particularly interesting is that Dumbo octopuses can alter their skin color and texture, though in the deep sea where light is scarce or absent, this ability serves different purposes than camouflage. It might be used for communication with other Dumbo octopuses or possibly for temperature regulation. These octopuses are also among the few cephalopods that swallow their prey whole rather than using a beak to tear it apart, likely an adaptation to the soft-bodied prey available at extreme depths. Female Dumbo octopuses appear to be continuously fertile, able to produce eggs at any time, which makes sense in an environment where encountering a mate might be rare and unpredictable. When an opportunity for reproduction arises, the octopus needs to be ready. Despite living at depths where the pressure would crush most creatures and where food is scarce, the Dumbo octopus maintains a lifestyle that appears almost leisurely, hovering above the bottom, occasionally flapping its ear fins, descending to catch a meal, existing in what seems like perpetual slow motion. In the deep sea, where life is difficult and food is scarce, some creatures have formed partnerships that seem almost impossible. There are anemones that attach themselves to hermit crab shells, gaining mobility while providing the crab with stinging tentacles for defense. There are fish that clean parasites from sharks, gaining a meal while providing a service. But perhaps the strangest partnerships involve bioluminescence. Some deep-sea fish have pouches or organs specifically designed to house bioluminescent bacteria, providing the bacteria with nutrients and a safe home while gaining living light for hunting, communication, or camouflage. The bacteria in these pouches are not the fish's own cells but separate organisms that have co-evolved with their hosts to the point where either can survive without the other. Some squid have light organs containing both their own light-producing cells and symbiotic bacteria, creating hybrid bioluminescent systems that combine both strategies. These partnerships remind us that survival in extreme environments often requires cooperation, that the boundary between self and other can become blurry when mutual benefit is strong enough. In the deep sea, where every advantage matters, forming alliances with other species isn't just beneficial, it's sometimes essential. Life finds ways to support other life, creating networks of mutual dependence that make the entire ecosystem stronger, more resilient, more capable of surviving in conditions that would be impossible for any single organism alone. Let's return to one of the deep sea's most remarkable fish and explore more of its mysteries. The barrel-eye fish's transparent head is filled with a clear, jelly-like fluid that protects its delicate tubular eyes. This fluid is clear enough that light passes through almost undistorted, allowing the eyes to function despite being inside the head. The dome itself is thin but remarkably strong, protecting the eyes from the stinging tentacles of jellyfish that the barrel-eye often encounters. For decades, scientists only saw dead barrel eyes where the transparent dome had been damaged during collection, and they assumed the eyes were fixed pointing upward. But when living barrel eyes were finally observed by submersibles, researchers discovered the eyes could rotate, allowing the fish to look forward when needed. The barrel eye typically hangs motionless in the water, its body perfectly positioned to minimize energy expenditure, its upward-pointing eyes watching for prey silhouetted against the faint light from above. When it spots something interesting, the eyes rotate forward, the fish moves into position, and with remarkable precision, it captures the prey. That transparent dome, filled with fluid, housing rotating eyes, represents one of evolution's most ingenious solutions to the problem of seeing in the deep sea's twilight zone. It's an adaptation so unusual that it seems designed rather than evolved, yet it arose entirely through natural selection. Each small improvement in dome clarity, or eye protection, conferring a survival advantage until the final result was this remarkable transparent shield. In the deep sea, reproduction is often a slow, careful process. Many deep-sea creatures produce relatively few offspring but invest heavily in each one. Deep-sea octopuses, for example, lay large eggs and guard them for extended periods, sometimes years, ensuring the young have the best possible chance of survival. The deepest nesting octopus ever observed was found at 14,000 feet, brooding her eggs on the wall of an underwater canyon. And based on the growth rate of other deep-sea octopuses, scientists estimate she would need to protect those eggs for 4 to 5 years before they hatched. During this time, the mother doesn't eat. She simply guards her eggs against predators, slowly starving as her offspring develop. It's a tremendous investment, one that ends with the mother's death when the eggs finally hatch. This strategy, called semiparity, where an organism reproduces once and then dies, is rare in octopuses but occurs in some deep-sea species where opportunities for reproduction are so rare that putting everything into a single reproductive event makes sense. Other deep-sea creatures, like some sharks and fish, are viviparous, giving birth to live young that are relatively large and well-developed, skipping the vulnerable larval stage entirely. In an environment where small, helpless young would have little chance of survival, many species have evolved to produce fewer, larger, more capable offspring. It's quality over quantity, care over abundance, a reproductive strategy as patient and slow as the deep sea itself. We've met the vampire squid before, but let's watch it feed. In the darkness of the deep sea, the vampire squid extends two thin filaments from pockets between its arms. These filaments, which can be several times the length of the squid's body, are covered with tiny hair-like structures that catch particles of marine snow, those drifting bits of organic matter falling from the upper ocean. The squid allows these particles to accumulate on the filaments, and when enough has been collected, it retracts the filaments and draws them through its arms, using small suckers to strip off the food. Then it packages the collected matter into a mucus ball and eats it. This feeding strategy is extraordinarily efficient for the deep sea, where active hunting requires energy that might not be replaced by the calories in the prey. By passively collecting marine snow, the vampire squid can survive on resources that most other creatures ignore. It's not a fast strategy. The squid drifts through the darkness, filaments extended, waiting for enough particles to accumulate. But in the deep sea, patience is not just a virtue, it's a requirement. The vampire squid has essentially become a living drifting net, catching the ocean's waste and turning it into sustenance. Another example of how deep sea life has found ways to exploit every possible food source, no matter how sparse or diffuse. The gulper eel with its enormous mouth and expandable stomach represents extreme adaptation to feast or famine existence. When a gulper eel encounters prey, particularly something large, it can swallow the animal whole, and its stomach expands to accommodate meals that are many times the eel's normal body volume. The eel's jaw can unhinge, its body can stretch, and suddenly this relatively thin, whip-like creature transforms into something round and swollen, carrying its meal inside like a snake that swallowed a pig. This ability means the eel can take advantage of any food opportunity, regardless of the prey's size. In the deep sea, where days or weeks might pass between meals, this flexibility is crucial. Interestingly, scientists still don't fully understand the gulper eel's life history. Specimens caught have often had stones and other indigestible objects in their stomachs, leading some researchers to speculate that the eels might accidentally swallow debris while feeding with their enormous mouths agape, essentially vacuum feeding on anything in their path. The bioluminescent organ at the tip of the eel's tail might serve as a lure, or it might be used to attract mates, or possibly both. There's still much we don't know about these strange creatures. What's clear is that the gulper eel has committed entirely to the strategy of being able to eat anything, anywhere, anytime. and its body plan reflects that commitment in every bizarre detail. Let your mind now follow a particle of marine snow on its journey from the surface to the abyss. It begins as something organic, perhaps a dead zooplankton, a fecal pellet, a fragment of algae. At the surface where it originates, it's part of the bustling, sunlit world where photosynthesis powers nearly all life. But then it begins to sink. Slowly, it descends through the water column, taking days or weeks to reach the deep seafloor. As it sinks, creatures feed on it, bacteria colonize it, it aggregates with other particles, breaking apart and reforming. By the time it reaches the depths, it's been through a gauntlet of consumption, and only a fraction of surface production makes it to the deep sea. Yet this small fraction is crucial. It's essentially the only food source for most deep-sea creatures, the connection between the sunlit surface and the dark abyss. These sinking particles create what's called the biological pump, transporting carbon from the atmosphere, where it was captured by photosynthesis, to the deep ocean, where it might remain locked away for centuries. The journey of a single particle of marine snow connects the entire ocean vertically, linking ecosystems that seem completely separate. Some particles make this journey carrying passengers, tiny larvae of deep-sea creatures hitching a ride to the depths where they'll spend their adult lives. Marine snow is the ocean's circulatory system, the rain that feeds the deep, the thread connecting light and darkness. In certain parts of the ocean, particularly between 600 and 3,000 feet deep, there are regions where oxygen concentration drops to extremely low levels, sometimes near zero. These are called oxygen minimum zones or OMZs, and they form where lots of sinking organic matter is being decomposed by bacteria, which consume the available oxygen faster than it can be replenished by water circulation. Most marine life cannot survive in these zones, but some creatures have evolved remarkable adaptations to thrive there. Certain fish and crustaceans can survive oxygen levels that would be lethal to their relatives, using highly efficient respiratory systems or anaerobic metabolism. Some creatures perform vertical migrations, rising into oxygenated waters to breathe, before returning to the OMZ where there's less competition and fewer predators. These zones are expanding in many parts of the ocean due to warming waters, which hold less dissolved oxygen, and increased nutrient pollution, which fuels bacterial growth. The expansion of OMZs is concerning because it effectively compresses the livable space in the ocean, squeezing oxygen-dependent creatures into narrower bands. But the creatures that can tolerate low oxygen find OMZs to be havens, places where they can exist without competition from the vast majority of marine species. It's another example of how the ocean creates extreme environments, and how life finds ways to exploit even these challenging conditions, turning what seems like a dead zone into an opportunity. In the deep sea lives a small fish with one of the unfortunate names in the ocean, the coffin fish. Despite its morbid name, it's a fascinating creature, a type of frogfish that's adapted to deep water. Coffin fish have extremely loose, flabby skin that gives them a droopy, sad appearance. But this skin serves a purpose. It increases their surface area without adding much weight, helping them maintain neutral buoyancy with minimal effort. They typically rest on the seafloor, looking like small, spiky balls of flesh, and they hunt using a small lure-like appendage that extends from above their mouth. When prey investigates the lure, the coffinfish strikes with remarkable speed, its mouth expanding to create a powerful suction that draws the prey in. The strike takes just milliseconds, one of the fastest feeding movements in the ocean. What's particularly interesting is that different species of coffinfish have different lure designs, some elaborate and branching, others simple, each apparently designed to mimic different types of prey organisms. The coffinfish's mottled, spiky skin helps it blend into the rocky or muddy seafloor where it hunts, effectively making it invisible until it's too late for prey to escape. Despite their somewhat comical appearance, Coffin fish are efficient ambush predators perfectly adapted to their deep-sea environment. Another reminder that in the deep ocean, strange appearances often hide remarkably sophisticated hunting strategies. In shallow water and on land, amphipods are small, shrimp-like crustaceans, usually less than an inch long. But in the deep sea, some species grow to enormous sizes. Giant amphipods can reach over a foot in length, with powerful jaws and a voracious appetite. These creatures are scavengers, arriving quickly at food falls like dead whales or fish and consuming flesh with remarkable efficiency. They swarm over carcasses in writhing masses, hundreds or thousands of individuals feeding together, stripping flesh from bones in a feeding frenzy that can last for days. Despite their fearsome feeding behavior and alien appearance, giant amphipods are actually quite similar in body plan to their smaller shallow water relatives, just scaled up dramatically. This gigantism occurs in several deep-sea crustacean groups, and scientists aren't entirely sure why, though theories include reduced predation pressure in the deep sea, allowing larger body sizes, or the benefits of a lower surface area to volume ratio in cold water, which helps conserve heat and energy. When deep-sea cameras capture footage of giant amphipods, they're often moving with surprising speed despite their size, their many legs propelling them across the seafloor or through the water column. There's something simultaneously fascinating and unsettling about watching these oversized versions of familiar creatures, like seeing the deep sea's version of horror movie mutations, except they're real, and they're thriving in the darkness. The deep seafloor in many areas is covered with a soft, fine sediment called ooze. This isn't a scientific term used casually. Ooze is the actual geological term for these sediments, which form from the remains of tiny organisms, primarily the shells of foraminifera and the skeletons of diatoms, that rain down from the upper ocean and accumulate over millions of years. The ooze can be dozens of feet thick in some areas, a soft blanket covering the hard volcanic rock of the seafloor. Walking on it, if you could reach these depths, would be like walking through thick mud or pudding. For the creatures that live on or in the ooze, it's both home and habitat and food source. Many animals burrow through it, creating tunnels and chambers, and their activities bioturbate the sediment, mixing it and oxygenating it. When cameras are lowered to the deep seafloor, you often see strange tracks and trails in the ooze, evidence of animals moving through it, though the creatures themselves might not be visible. The ooze also contains preserved chemical signatures of past ocean conditions, making it valuable for understanding Earth's climate history. Scientists can core into this sediment and read the layers like pages in a history book, each layer representing a different time period, each containing information about temperature, ocean chemistry, and biological productivity. The deep seafloor ooze is simultaneously a living habitat and an archive of time, a place where past and present merge. The deep-sea dragonfish is not just dark, it's extraordinarily black, absorbing up to 99.5% of light that hits it. This makes it one of the blackest creatures known, darker than most human-made materials. This extreme blackness is achieved through specialized skin structures that trap light, preventing it from reflecting. Why does this matter in the deep sea? Because many creatures use bioluminescence to hunt or communicate, and in a world lit only by living light, being highly reflective would make you visible. By absorbing nearly all light, the dragonfish becomes essentially invisible even when other creatures' bioluminescence passes over it. Only its eyes and the small photophores on its body remain visible, and even these it can control, shuttering them to remain hidden. The dragonfish's blackness is so extreme that when it's photographed, it often appears as almost a silhouette, a void shaped like a fish, details lost in the absolute darkness of its skin. This adaptation represents the arms race between visibility and camouflage taken to its logical extreme. In a world where everyone carries their own light, The best camouflage isn't transparency or matching your background, it's becoming a light-absorbing void, so black that even directed illumination can't reveal you. The dragonfish swims through the darkness less like a creature and more like a moving hole in reality, present but unseeable, the deep sea's living shadow. On the seafloor in certain areas, there are pools of water within the water, dense brine that's so salty it doesn't mix with the surrounding ocean. These brine pools form when salt deposits beneath the seafloor dissolve and create extremely salty water that sinks to form lakes or rivers on the ocean bottom. The boundary between the brine and the regular seawater is sharp enough that you can see it clearly, like a lake's surface, except this surface exists thousands of feet underwater. These brine pools are usually toxic to most marine life, containing not just salt but often high concentrations of methane and hydrogen sulfide. Yet even here, life exists. Certain bacteria and archaea thrive in these conditions, and they support small ecosystems of specialized creatures that can tolerate the extreme chemistry. Some brine pools have been named: the brine pool NR1 in the Gulf of Mexico, the Orca Basin. They're eerie to observe in submarine footage, looking like bodies of water at the bottom of the ocean, complete with shores and sometimes waves. Occasionally, unfortunate fish or crabs wander into these pools and die, their bodies preserved in the toxic brine like specimens in formaldehyde. The brine pools are extreme environments within extreme environments, pushing the boundaries of where and how life can exist, and as always, life has found a way to claim even these chemical deserts. In the cold, deep waters of the North Pacific lives a large shark that moves with deliberate slowness. The Pacific sleeper shark can grow over 20 feet long, making it one of the largest predatory sharks, yet it swims slowly, almost lethargically, through the dark water. Scientists initially thought these sharks were scavengers, too slow to catch active prey, but stomach contents revealed they eat fast-moving fish, squid, and even seals. How does a slow shark catch fast prey? Researchers now believe these sharks might hunt sleeping prey, approaching seals or fish that are resting and striking before the victim can react fully. Others speculate the sharks might use stealth, moving so slowly and quietly that prey doesn't recognize them as a threat until it's too late. The sleeper shark's body is dark gray or black, helping it blend into the darkness, and it has a relatively small mouth for its size, perhaps adapted for precision strikes rather than the slashing attacks of faster sharks. These sharks are also parasitized by specialized copepods that attach to their eyes, possibly impairing their vision, yet the sharks seem unbothered, perhaps relying more on other senses to hunt in the darkness. The sleeper shark reminds us that success as a predator doesn't always require speed. Sometimes patience and stealth are equally effective, perhaps more so in an environment where prey have few places to hide but nowhere to maintain constant vigilance. On parts of the deep seafloor, particularly near areas with strong currents that bring nutrients, brittle stars gather in such dense numbers they create living carpets covering every available surface. A single square meter might contain hundreds of individuals, their long, snake-like arms raised into the current to catch falling particles of food. These aggregations, sometimes called brittle star beds, can extend for considerable distances, creating what looks like a garden of waving arms. Each brittle star anchors itself to the bottom with some arms while extending others upward to feed, and the cumulative effect of thousands of animals doing this creates a forest of arms filtering the water. Brittle stars are relatives of sea stars but more delicate, with thin arms that can regenerate if lost. They come in various colors, though in the deep sea where color is meaningless, most are pale or dark. When disturbed, brittle star beds can react in waves, arms pulling in, then slowly extending again once the disturbance passes. There's something mesmerizing about footage of these dense aggregations, all those arms waving gently in sync with the current, creating patterns like wine through wheat fields, except this is miles underwater in complete darkness, and the wheat is thousands of ancient echinoderms catching particles of food too small to see. These brittle star gardens represent one of the deep sea's most successful community strategies. Gather where food is adequate, and filter it collectively, each individual part of a larger living structure. In some areas of the seafloor, methane gas seeps up from beneath the sediment, creating another extreme environment that supports unique life. These cold seeps aren't as dramatically hot as hydrothermal vents, but they provide chemical energy that specialized bacteria can exploit. The bacteria form the base of a food web that includes massive clams, tube worms, and bacterial mats that cover the seafloor around the seeps. The clams can grow extremely large, with shells over a foot across, and like the tube worms at hydrothermal vents, they house symbiotic bacteria in their tissues, bacteria that convert methane and sulfur compounds into nutrients the clams can use. These seep communities can persist for decades or centuries as long as the methane continues flowing. What's particularly interesting is that methane seeps occur globally, along continental margins where organic-rich sediments produce methane through decomposition. They represent another pathway for chemosynthetic life, another way that organisms have learned to harvest energy from Earth's geological processes rather than from the sun. The ecosystems around methane seeps are quieter than those around hydrothermal vents, lacking the dramatic black smokers and high temperatures. But they're equally remarkable, equally challenging to conventional ideas about what's required for complex life to thrive. Sound behaves strangely in the ocean. There's a layer called the SOFAR channel, sound fixing and ranging, usually around 3,000 feet deep, where sound waves get trapped and can travel thousands of miles with minimal loss of energy. This occurs because sound speed in water depends on temperature and pressure, and the SOFAR channel represents a depth where sound refracts back toward the channel from both above and below, creating a natural waveguide. Whales apparently know about this channel and use it to communicate across ocean basins. The songs of fin whales can travel from one side of an ocean to the other when the whales vocalize at SOFAR depths. During the Cold War, the U.S. military set up underwater microphones to listen for submarines in this channel, and scientists gained access to this network to study whale communications, creating a fascinating overlap between military technology and marine biology. The SOFAR channel means that deep-sea creatures live in an environment where sound from distant sources, whale songs, ship engines, seismic events, can reach them from thousands of miles away. It's like living in a giant whispering gallery where sounds from across an entire ocean basin converge. For creatures that rely on sound for communication or hunting, this channel creates opportunities but also challenges. An acoustic environment far more complex than anything experienced on land. Some deep-sea snailfish live in waters so cold they should freeze, particularly near Antarctica where water temperatures can drop below the freezing point of normal body fluids. These fish have evolved antifreeze proteins, special molecules in their blood and tissues that prevent ice crystals from forming. The proteins bind to tiny ice crystals that do form and prevent them from growing, allowing the fish to remain liquid and functional in water cold enough to turn most fish into popsicles. Similar antifreeze proteins have evolved independently in several cold water fish groups, suggesting this is a relatively achievable solution to cold adaptation. Yet each group's proteins are slightly different, representing parallel evolution solving the same problem in slightly different ways. What's remarkable is how effective these proteins are. They can lower the freezing point of body fluids by several degrees, enough to make the difference between life and death in polar waters. The snailfish swimming through near-freezing water, its tissues protected by molecular antifreeze, represents another example of life's chemical ingenuity. These proteins don't just prevent freezing, they're so efficient that scientists have studied them for potential applications in organ preservation, frozen food technology, and even in developing crops that can survive unexpected frosts. The deep-sea snailfish, going about its business in the frigid darkness, carries within its blood a molecular innovation that might one day help preserve human organs for transplant or protect agricultural crops. It's yet another reminder that solutions to human challenges often already exist in nature, perfected through millions of years of evolution, waiting to be discovered in the most unlikely places, like the blood of a small fish swimming in the coldest, deepest parts of the ocean. In the deep ocean, particularly in Antarctic and deep Pacific waters, grow some of the most delicate and beautiful structures in the sea. Glass sponges are filter feeders that build skeletons made of silica, the same material as glass, creating intricate lattice structures of extraordinary beauty and engineering sophistication. Some species grow in complex vase shapes, others in branching patterns that resemble frozen waterfalls or elaborate chandeliers. These structures are not just beautiful, they're remarkably strong and efficient, with a geometry that distributes stress evenly and maximizes water flow for filtering. Glass sponges can live for thousands of years, growing slowly, layer by layer, in the cold, stable deep sea environment. Some reefs formed by glass sponges are ancient, with living sponges growing atop the skeletons of their ancestors, creating structures dozens of feet tall. When you see photographs of glass sponges, particularly when lit from behind or within, they glow with an ethereal quality, their silica skeletons catching and refracting light in ways that make them look less like living creatures and more like frozen light sculptures. Scientists study glass sponge skeletons for insights into materials engineering, as their structure is more efficient than many human-designed materials. After the sponge dies, its skeleton remains, often intact for centuries, a lasting monument in glass to a life lived in slow motion in the deep sea's darkness. These are animals that blur the line between living organism and mineral sculpture, creatures that build themselves from glass and filter the ocean for millennia. Many deep-sea jellyfish have evolved incredibly long oral arms, the tentacle-like appendages that hang from their bells. Some species have oral arms extending dozens of feet, trailing through the water like fishing lines. Unlike the stinging tentacles that many jellyfish possess, these oral arms are often covered with small, sticky cells that capture prey rather than stunning it. The jelly drifts slowly, and those extraordinarily long arms cover a huge volume of water, increasing the chances that something edible will touch them. When prey is caught, the arms slowly contract, drawing the food up toward the mouth, which can take hours. Everything about these jellies is patient, slow, unhurried. They pulse gently to maintain position, their arms trail below them, and they wait. In the deep sea where food is sparse, this strategy of creating a passive net that covers maximum space while expending minimal energy is logical, even elegant. Some of these jellies are bioluminescent, their arms glowing gently, which might attract prey or serve as communication with other jellies. The sight of a deep-sea jelly with its belt pulsing softly, and its arms extending far below, sometimes glowing, sometimes not, creates an image of alien beauty. They look less like animals and more like living architecture, structures of flesh and light suspended in the void, waiting with infinite patience for the ocean to deliver sustenance to their trailing arms. Let's return to the hagfish, that ancient eel-like creature, and explore more of its remarkable biology. Beyond the defensive slime, hagfish have other unusual features. They're the only known vertebrates with a skull but no vertebral column. Instead, they have a notochord, a flexible rod that provides structure. This places them at an interesting point in evolution, more primitive than true fish. Hagfish also have a unique circulatory system with multiple hearts, one main heart and several accessory hearts that help pump blood through their long bodies. Their metabolism is extremely slow. They can survive months without food, and their bodies can absorb nutrients directly through their skin from the water around them when they're buried in a carcass, feeding from both inside and outside simultaneously. Perhaps most remarkably, Hagfish can survive for extended periods in oxygen-depleted water or even in complete anoxia, essentially holding their breath at the cellular level. This allows them to burrow deep into large carcasses where other scavengers cannot follow, monopolizing the food source. The hagfish represents a body plan so primitive, so ancient, that it predates most of what we consider essential to vertebrate life, yet it's successful, abundant, and fills an important ecological niche. Looking at a hagfish is like looking at a living rough draft of vertebrate evolution, before the final edits that would produce fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and eventually us. Around hydrothermal vents and cold seeps, the seafloor is sometimes covered with thick bacterial mats, dense growths of microorganisms visible even in the footage from submersibles. These mats can be white, yellow, orange, or even purple, depending on the bacteria species and the chemicals they're metabolizing. The bacteria in these mats are chemosynthetic, converting sulfur compounds, methane, or other chemicals into energy, and they produce organic compounds that support entire food webs. Some animals graze directly on the bacterial mats, scraping them off rocks or sediment. Others, like certain worms and clams, have evolved symbiotic relationships with the bacteria, housing them in specialized organs and receiving nutrients in return. What's particularly fascinating is how quickly these mats can form. When a new vent opens, bacteria can colonize it within days, creating a mat that then attracts larger organisms. The mats are essentially the same thing as primary production in the surface ocean, where photosynthetic organisms convert energy into organic matter, except here the energy comes from Earth's interior rather than the sun. These bacterial mats represent life at its most fundamental level. Single-celled organisms that have mastered the chemistry of turning inorganic compounds into living matter, and everything else in these deep-sea chemosynthetic ecosystems depends ultimately on these humble bacterial pioneers. Comb jellies, or ctenophores, are among the most beautiful creatures in the deep sea, though their beauty is subtle, requiring the right light to reveal it. They're not true jellyfish but a separate group that swims using 8 rows of comb-like structures called comb plates. When light hits these beating combs, it diffracts, creating rainbow effects that ripple along the animal's body. In the deep sea where natural light is absent, this rainbow effect would normally never be seen, which is why it's likely a byproduct of structure rather than an adaptation. But when submersible lights illuminate a comb jelly, the effect is magical, waves of color pulsing along its body as the combs beat. Many deep-sea comb jellies are also bioluminescent, producing blue-green light, which combines with the rainbow diffraction to create a light show of extraordinary complexity. Some species have long tentacles covered with sticky cells for catching prey. Others have evolved to become active predators with large mouths. Comb jellies are among the most ancient multicellular animals, with a fossil record stretching back over 500 million years, and their basic body plan has remained remarkably consistent. Watching a comb jelly pulse through the water, rainbows cascading along its transparent body, reminds us that beauty exists in the deep sea even when there's usually no light to reveal it, as if beauty itself is a fundamental property that emerges regardless of whether anyone is watching. At the deepest parts of the ocean, there are bacteria that don't just tolerate the pressure, they require it to survive. These piezophils, or barophiles, have evolved cell membranes and proteins that function optimally under extreme pressure and actually malfunction or cease working if the pressure is reduced. Bring them to the surface, and they die, unable to survive in what we consider normal pressure. Scientists studying these bacteria have had to develop special pressurized containers and laboratories to keep them alive for study. The bacteria's adaptations include more fluid cell membranes that would be too fluid at surface pressure, and proteins with slightly different structures that maintain proper shape only when compressed. These microorganisms challenge our understanding of pressure's effects on life. We tend to think of pressure as universally damaging, something to overcome or resist, but for piezophils, pressure is as essential as oxygen is to us. Remove it, and their biology fails. This means that in the deepest trenches, there are bacteria living in conditions that are not just extreme from our perspective but actually optimal from theirs. Organisms for whom crushing pressure is comfort, for whom the weight of miles of water is not a burden but a requirement. They remind us that extreme is relative, that one organism's harsh environment is another's perfect home. Some deep-sea octopuses lay eggs with shells so thin they're almost transparent, paper-thin membranes protecting the developing young. These eggs are often laid in clusters attached to rocks or corals, and the female guards them for extended periods, sometimes years. The thin shells allow oxygen to diffuse through easily, important in the deep sea where oxygen levels are often low. But it also makes the eggs vulnerable to predators and damage, which is why the female's protection is crucial. During the brooding period, the female doesn't eat, slowly starving as she fans the eggs to keep them oxygenated and clean, removes any dead eggs before they can contaminate the others, and drives away any potential predators. By the time the eggs hatch, the mother is often near death, having given everything to ensure her offspring's survival. When researchers have observed brooding deep-sea octopuses, they've noted how the females seem to weaken visibly over time, their skin becoming paler, their movements more sluggish, yet they never abandon their eggs. This devoted maternal care, ending in the mother's death, is one of nature's most poignant examples of parental investment. The tiny octopuses that eventually emerge from those paper-thin eggs are already well-developed, miniature versions of adults, ready to begin their lives in the deep sea. Their mother's sacrifice has given them the best possible start in an unforgiving environment. Imagine, if you can, the deep sea at night, though every time is night in the deep sea. Bioluminescence isn't random, it follows patterns and rhythms. Certain creatures flash at regular intervals. Others pulse when disturbed. Some glow continuously. If you could see the entire display at once, it might resemble a slow, underwater fireworks show, lights appearing and disappearing, pulsing and flowing, creating patterns in 3 dimensions throughout the water column. Scientists have described moments when something disturbs a cloud of bioluminescent plankton, creating a cascade of light that spreads through the water, each organism triggering the next, waves of blue-green luminescence rippling outward. Or when a predator strikes, creating a burst of light that attracts other predators, which create their own lights, leading to a chain reaction of bioluminescence. The deep sea's darkness isn't empty or dead, it's filled with living light, a constant conversation in photons, messages sent and received, warnings and lures, recognition signals and confusion tactics. This bioluminescent orchestra plays constantly, billions of creatures adding their individual notes to a symphony we're only beginning to appreciate. Each flash has meaning, purpose, evolutionary significance. Together, they create something larger, an ecosystem that communicates through light, where darkness is the canvas and bioluminescence is the language, spoken fluently by creatures that have never seen the sun. Many deep-sea fish have reduced their bone density to help with buoyancy in the pressurized environment. Some species have such minimal skeletons that they're barely more than cartilage, similar to sharks but taken even further. This reduction in hard tissue means these fish are extremely fragile when brought to the surface. They collapse under their own weight without the supporting pressure of the deep sea. It's not that they're weak in their natural environment. Rather, they're perfectly optimized for that environment, and only that environment. A fish that seems barely substantial, almost translucent, drifting in the deep sea is actually a marvel of efficiency. Every unnecessary bit of heavy bone removed through evolution, leaving only what's absolutely required for structure and survival. This is biological engineering taken to its extreme. Build only what's needed, and no more. The result is creatures that seem impossibly delicate, yet they're surviving in one of Earth's harshest environments. When you see photographs of deep-sea fish with their large heads, small bodies, and seemingly fragile construction, you're seeing the end result of millions of years of optimization for life under pressure, in darkness, in cold, with minimal food. These fish have shed everything unnecessary, becoming streamlined for deep-sea existence in ways that make them seem alien but are actually profoundly logical. For centuries, giant squid were legends, creatures of myth mentioned in sailors' tales but never confirmed by science. These enormous cephalopods, which can grow over 40 feet long, managed to avoid scientific documentation despite their size until a dead specimen washed ashore in the 1800s. Even then, living giant squid remained unseen until 2004, when the first photographs of a living giant squid in its natural habitat were finally captured. The first video footage came in 2012. For such a large animal to remain so elusive tells us something profound about the ocean's vastness and the deep sea's impenetrability. Giant squid live at depths where humans rarely venture, typically between 1,000 and 3,000 feet, and they're apparently solitary, rarely encountered by chance. Their bodies are muscular and streamlined, their eyes among the largest in the animal kingdom, each eye the size of a dinner plate, adapted to detect the faint light of bioluminescence or the dark shape of their primary predator, sperm whales. When the first video finally revealed a giant squid in its element, it showed a creature that was graceful and powerful, not a monster but an elegant predator perfectly designed for deep-sea life. The giant squid reminds us that the ocean still holds secrets, that animals of substantial size can remain essentially unknown for centuries, that despite all our technology and exploration, the deep sea remains largely mysterious. While many sea cucumbers crawl or sit on the seafloor, some deep-sea species have evolved the ability to swim by flexing their bodies in wave-like motions. These swimming sea cucumbers, particularly species like enypniasts, pulse through the water with surprising grace for creatures that look like animated vegetables. Their bodies are transparent or translucent, and you can see their internal organs working as they swim. They use this swimming ability to escape predators or to move between feeding areas, and when they're done swimming, they simply descend to the seafloor and resume their typical sea cucumber existence, crawling along and vacuuming up sediment. What's particularly endearing is how unlikely their swimming appears. Sea cucumbers seem like they should be unable to swim, yet some do, and with considerable efficiency. Watching footage of a swimming sea cucumber, its body undulating, tentacles extended, drifting through the darkness like a small, translucent blimp, creates a sense of delight. It's unexpected, almost whimsical, this unlikely swimmer navigating the deep sea. The swimming sea cucumber reminds us that evolution experiments constantly, that even organisms with established body plans can develop surprising new capabilities, that the rules we think govern how creatures should move or behave are always subject to revision in the deep sea's laboratory of adaptation. One reason the deep sea harbors such unique life is its remarkable stability. Temperature remains constant year-round, usually just above freezing. There are no seasons, no storms, no day-night cycles. The pressure is constant. The darkness is absolute and unchanging. For millions of years, the deep sea has offered this stability, and organisms have adapted not just to the extremes but to the consistency. This stability means that deep-sea creatures often lack the flexibility that shallow-water creatures need. They're highly specialized for specific conditions and can't tolerate variation. It also means they evolve slowly, as there's little environmental pressure driving rapid change. The deep sea is sometimes described as a museum of evolution, preserving ancient body plans because there's been no reason to abandon them. But this stability also makes deep-sea ecosystems extremely vulnerable to human impacts. These creatures have no experience with rapid change, no evolutionary preparation for temperature shifts or chemical changes or physical disturbance. When humans trawl the deep seafloor or warm the ocean or change its chemistry, we're introducing variation into an environment that hasn't experienced variation in millions of years, affecting organisms with no capacity to adapt quickly. The deep sea's stability, which has been its defining feature and the foundation of its unique ecosystems, may become its greatest vulnerability in an era of rapid human-driven environmental change. Many squid species produce ink as a defense, releasing a dark cloud that confuses predators while the squid escapes. But what good is a cloud of dark ink in the deep sea where everything is already completely dark? Deep sea squid have evolved a brilliant solution. Their ink is bioluminescent. When threatened, these squid release a cloud that glows, creating what researchers call a pseudo-squid, a glowing decoy that hangs in the water while the squid itself jets away into darkness. The predator, distracted by the glowing cloud that roughly resembles the squid's size and shape, attacks the decoy while the real squid escapes. Some deep-sea squid can release multiple bioluminescent ink clouds, creating a series of decoys. Others can vary the intensity or pattern of the bioluminescence, perhaps creating more convincing decoys. It's an extraordinary adaptation, taking a defense mechanism that works in shallow water and completely reimagining it for a dark environment where visual cues are about light, not shadow. The deep-sea squid jetting away while its glowing decoy distracts a predator is using sophisticated cognitive tactics, misdirection, decoy creation, exploiting an attacker's expectations. It's not just a reflex but a strategy, and a clever one at that. Another example of how deep-sea creatures have evolved solutions to problems that seem unique to their environment. As we move into the final portion of our journey, let your breathing become even slower, even more relaxed. Picture the deep seafloor in areas away from vents and seeps, vast abyssal plains stretching in all directions, soft sediment extending to the horizon if there were light to see a horizon. Here, life exists at its most peaceful. A sea cucumber slowly processes sediment. A brittle star extends its arms into a gentle current. A fish rests on the bottom, conserving energy, barely moving. Hours might pass with nothing changing, no drama, no urgency, just a slow continuation of existence. This is life stripped to its essentials, removed from the frantic pace of surface ecosystems where predation and competition create constant motion. The deep seafloor in these quiet areas might seem boring, but there's something profound in that stillness, something almost meditative. These creatures aren't racing against time. They're existing within it, patiently, calmly, doing what they've done for millions of years. The deep seafloor is a place where you could observe for hours and see almost no movement. Yet it's full of life, just life lived slowly, quietly, without hurry. It's a reminder that existence doesn't have to be fast or dramatic to be meaningful, that there's value in stillness, in patience, in the slow, steady rhythm of breathing, eating, existing. Some deep-sea jellyfish are remarkably simple in structure, just a bell and a few tentacles, almost nothing more. They pulse through the water with minimal effort, their bodies barely more substantial than the water itself. These simple jellies often have a translucent or slightly colored bell, sometimes tinged with red or orange, colors that appear black in the deep sea. They eat tiny prey, move slowly, and exist in a state that seems almost zen-like in its simplicity. There's no complex behavior, no sophisticated hunting strategies, just gentle pulsing through the darkness, tentacles trailing, waiting for food to contact them. When you watch footage of these simple jellies, they create an almost hypnotic effect, their bells contracting and relaxing in perfect rhythm, pulse and relax, like a visual representation of breathing. They've mastered the art of doing almost nothing while still surviving, existing at the minimum energy cost possible while maintaining life. In an environment where food is scarce, They've achieved perfect efficiency, minimal structure, minimal movement, minimal energy expenditure. These jellies are life reduced to its essence, beautiful in their simplicity, peaceful in their unhurried existence, drifting through eternity with no apparent stress, no visible struggle, just the quiet maintenance of being alive. Let's return once more to the whale sharks and their deep-sea excursions, but this time let's focus on what these dives might mean to the sharks themselves. Imagine being a creature of warmth and light, spending your time near the surface where the sun penetrates, where water is warm and food is abundant. Then, periodically, you descend into cold darkness, thousands of feet down, into a realm completely different from your usual home. Why? Perhaps for thermoregulation, cooling your massive body in the cold, deep water. Perhaps following prey. Perhaps for reasons we don't yet understand. But consider the experience, the gradual darkening as you descend, the increasing cold, the changing pressure. For the whale shark, this must represent a dramatic shift in sensory environment, yet they do it calmly, regularly, as if moving between worlds is simply part of their routine. They bridge the sunlit surface and the dark abyss, comfortable in both, belonging fully to either. The whale shark's ability to span these environments reminds us that boundaries we perceive as absolute may be permeable, that creatures can be adaptable enough to move between seemingly incompatible worlds, that home doesn't have to be a single place but can be a range of places, each offering different resources, different experiences. The snailfish that holds the depth record, that small, gelatinous creature swimming deeper than any other fish, seems almost impossibly delicate. Watching footage of it, you see a fish that moves with gentle, almost lazy motions, its body slightly translucent, its fins undulating slowly. There's no sense of struggle, no apparent stress despite the fact that it's living under pressure that would crush most life forms. The snailfish simply exists at these depths, as comfortable there as you are in your home. It hunts small crustaceans, swims slowly across the trench floor, and presumably lives out its life in calm routine. There's something reassuring about this, about the fact that even in the most extreme environment, life doesn't have to be a constant battle. The deepest living fish isn't a fearsome predator or a bizarre nightmare. It's a small, gentle creature that happens to live very, very deep. It reminds us that extreme environments don't necessarily produce extreme behaviors, that creatures can adapt to almost anything while maintaining a peaceful existence, that survival doesn't always look like struggle. As we approach the end of our journey, let's consider the pace of energy flow in the deep sea. In surface waters, food webs move quickly, phytoplankton blooms, zooplankton eat the phytoplankton, fish eat the zooplankton, larger fish eat smaller fish, all in relatively rapid succession. In the deep sea, everything slows down. Marine snow sinks slowly from above, taking weeks to reach the depths. Deep-sea creatures eat it slowly, digest it slowly, grow slowly. A particle of organic matter might pass through multiple deep-sea organisms over months or years before being completely processed. Predation events are rare, sometimes months apart for an individual predator. Reproduction is slow, with many species taking years or decades to reach maturity. The entire food web operates in what might seem like slow motion from our perspective, but it's not slow to the creatures living it. It's simply their normal pace. This slow food web is actually quite efficient in its way, extracting maximum energy from minimal input, wasting nothing, recycling everything. It's a food web built on patience, on making every calorie count, on living in balance with extremely limited resources. There's something almost peaceful about this slower pace, this ecosystem that isn't rushing anywhere, that exists in equilibrium with scarcity. On the seafloor live countless worms, some tiny, some several feet long, living in burrows in the sediment, or attached to rocks. These worms have simple lives, eating sediment or filtering particles from the water, reproducing occasionally, slowly growing. They don't hunt or flee. They don't have complex social structures or sophisticated behaviors. They simply are, existing in their small sections of seafloor, processing the environment around them, continuing the ancient work of turning death into life, of recycling nutrients, of maintaining the slow chemistry of the deep. Some of these worms are bright red due to hemoglobin in their blood, which helps them extract oxygen from the low oxygen environment. Others are pale, almost translucent. Many are blind, having no need for eyes in the eternal darkness. Watching footage of these worms, you see creatures completely adapted to a specific niche, with no apparent desires beyond their simple functions. They remind us that not all life needs to be complex to be successful, that sometimes simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, that a worm processing sediment on the deep seafloor is as fully alive, as completely itself, as any more complex creature. The deep sea has witnessed every major event in Earth's recent history: meteor impacts, ice ages, the rise and fall of countless species. Through it all, the deep sea has remained largely unchanged. Its creatures have persisted, adapted, continued. This resilience comes from the deep sea's isolation from surface events, its stability, and the conservative evolutionary strategies of its inhabitants. While surface ecosystems have been repeatedly disrupted and rebuilt, the deep sea has maintained continuity, a living connection to the ancient past. This doesn't mean the deep sea is invulnerable, especially now as human activities begin affecting even these remote depths. But it does speak to a certain timeless quality. The deep sea has seen everything and endured. Its creatures carry forward life strategies tested across millions of years, proven across countless generations. There's something reassuring about this resilience, this continuity, this sense that no matter what happens on the surface, life continues in the depths, patient and persistent and fundamentally unchanging, maintaining ancient patterns, keeping alive connections to Earth's deep past. Let's return once more to bioluminescence, that defining feature of deep-sea life. Imagine you could see all the bioluminescence in a column of deep-sea water at once, from the surface to the seafloor. It would be like looking into a starfield, countless points of light scattered through three-dimensional space, some steady, some flickering, some moving, others stationary. Blues and greens would dominate, with occasional reds. Patterns would emerge, denser light near certain depths where particular creatures aggregate, sparser light in between, sudden bursts when something is disturbed, slow pulses from jellies, quick flashes from fish. The entire water column would be alive with light, a galaxy suspended in water, each light representing a creature going about its business, hunting or fleeing or searching for mates or simply existing. This underwater galaxy has no darkness in the absolute sense. Instead, it has points of light separated by spaces of lesser light, a constant low-level glow punctuated by brighter moments. The deep sea, from this perspective, isn't dark but filled with living stars, a constellation that changes constantly but never fully dims, a reminder that even in places we call dark, life creates light, beauty emerges from necessity, and the absence of sun doesn't mean the absence of radiance. Everything that dies in the ocean, if it doesn't get eaten in surface waters, eventually sinks to the deep sea. This rain of death becomes the deep sea's primary food source. But there's something gentle about how the deep sea processes this death. Unlike surface scavengers that might tear into a carcass in a feeding frenzy, many deep sea scavengers are slow, methodical, patient. They arrive at a food fall and feed carefully, efficiently, completely. Nothing is wasted. Bones are consumed by specialized worms. Organic matter is processed by bacteria. Even the hardest materials eventually break down and rejoin the ecosystem. The deep sea is Earth's ultimate recycler, the place where the circle of life completes itself, where endings become beginnings. There's no violence in this, No struggle, just the slow, inexorable process of transformation. A whale dies, sinks, and over decades feeds an entire ecosystem, its body slowly disappearing until nothing remains but enriched sediment. Its decay as it should be, slow, complete, purposeful, feeding life rather than representing pure loss. In the deep sea, death isn't an end but a generous gift to the living, processed with thoroughness and respect by creatures specialized to extract every last bit of value from what has been offered. Many deep-sea fish spend most of their time doing almost nothing, conserving energy between rare feeding opportunities. They hover or rest on the bottom, their metabolism running at minimal levels, and they wait. This waiting isn't active or stressful, it's simply their default state. They might wait days or weeks for a meal, and when one appears, they respond, feed, and then return to waiting. This patience isn't a virtue they've cultivated, it's simply how they exist, an existence so different from surface fish that constantly swim, constantly search, constantly compete. The deep-sea fish has opted out of that race entirely, choosing instead a life of stillness punctuated by brief moments of activity. There's something almost zen about this approach to life, this acceptance of scarcity, this ability to exist contentedly in inaction. If you could ask a deep-sea fish if it's bored during those long waiting periods, the question would probably be meaningless. It's not waiting in the sense of anticipating something, it's simply being, existing in a state of perfect energy conservation, as comfortable in stillness as we are in motion. These patient fish remind us that there are many ways to live, that activity isn't the only valid mode of existence, that sometimes the wisest choice is simply to be still and let the world come to you. As we near the end of our journey together, let's reflect on beauty in the absence of light. The deep sea is beautiful, but it's a beauty that exists whether or not anyone observes it. The graceful pulsing of a jelly, the architecture of a glass sponge, the patterns of bioluminescence, all these occur in darkness, existing for their own sake or for functional purposes, not for appreciation. Yet when we do observe them, through submersibles or cameras, we find them beautiful. This suggests that beauty might not be in the eye of the beholder but an intrinsic property of natural forms, patterns that emerge from efficiency, adaptation, and the fundamental laws that govern life. The deep sea's beauty is quiet, subtle, often requiring careful observation to appreciate. It's not the bright, obvious beauty of a coral reef but something more contemplative, more mysterious. It's the beauty of forms revealed slowly, of understanding that emerges gradually, of appreciation that deepens the more you look. The deep sea teaches us that beauty doesn't need light to exist, that the most profound beauty might be that which persists unseen, creating and maintaining itself in darkness simply because that's what natural processes do, that's how life manifests, regardless of whether consciousness is present to appreciate it. It might seem strange to attribute contentment to deep-sea creatures, but consider, these animals are perfectly adapted to their environment. They're not struggling against their circumstances. They're living within them comfortably. A snailfish at 26,000 feet isn't suffering from the pressure, it's at home. A jellyfish drifting in darkness isn't lonely or afraid. It's simply existing as jellyfish have existed for hundreds of millions of years. These creatures have no concept that their environment is extreme. To them, it's simply the environment. They're not persevering against odds or surviving despite challenges. They're thriving in the only world they know, doing exactly what their species has evolved to do, existing in a state that we might call contentment if we could understand their experience. There's peace in that idea, in the thought that even in Earth's most extreme environment, creatures aren't suffering but simply being. That adaptation is so complete that what seems harsh from outside is comfortable from within. The deep sea's creatures remind us that quality of life isn't about external circumstances but about fit between organism and environment. That home is where you're adapted to be, that contentment might be the default state for any creature living in its proper place. Let your mind rest now in the concept of eternal night. In the deep sea, there's no dawn, no sunset, no cycles of light and dark. There's only darkness, constant and complete, stretching in all directions, extending from the present moment into the infinite past and forward into the infinite future. This darkness isn't frightening to the creatures that live in it, it's simply the background of existence, as normal and unremarkable as daylight is to us. They've never known anything else, and they'd evolved to not just tolerate but to thrive in this eternal night. For them, darkness isn't the absence of light but the natural state of the world, and the bioluminescence they produce or encounter is the only light that's meaningful, light they control, light they understand. The deep sea's eternal night reminds us that our experience isn't universal, that the rhythms and conditions we consider normal aren't normal everywhere, that life can exist contentedly in circumstances we'd find impossible. There's something freeing about this realization, a reminder that our perspective is limited, that beyond our experience lies a vast range of other experiences, other ways of being, other normals. In the deep sea's darkness, creatures live complete lives, as full and meaningful as any lives lived in sunlight, proving that light, while precious to us, isn't necessary for the fullness of existence.